Hey, have you ever had your quiet, ordinary life change just because you helped someone one time? He thought she lived in a completely different world. A beautiful transfer student. Untouchable. Distant. But after helping a lost little girl, everything between them slowly begins to change. And this is where the story begins. The boy sat at his desk in class. With shining eyes, he looked at the girl with ash-colored hair. It was love at first sight. He noticed what seemed to him to be the most insignificant details. Elegant things that emphasized her attractiveness. Her beautiful hair, shimmering with silver. A sweet smile that radiated friendliness. A clear and pleasant voice. When she first transferred to this class, she was very shy. Nervously adjusting her hair, she introduced herself, Charlotte Bennett. The girl hoped to make friends with the boys. Looking at her, the boy was shocked. Transferring to 11th grade in the middle of the year was surprising. This boy's name was Akihito Aoyagi. A young man called out to him from behind. He noticed how lucky they were. Akihito's friend was named Akira Sionji. They had been friends since first grade. Akira asked Akihito if she had a boyfriend. He replied that she probably did, since she was so beautiful. Akira laughed and poked his friend, trying to cheer him up. Why so pessimistic? Akihito wasn't eager to continue the conversation, so he said bluntly, "If you want to know, ask her yourself." Following his friend's advice, Akira stood up, raising his hand and apologizing. He asked loudly if the girl had a boyfriend. Akihito was embarrassed for him. Rubbing his eyebrow, he sighed deeply. Charlotte was expecting a lot, but not such an awkward question. Blushing, she didn't know how to respond. Surprised, she asked again. A little embarrassed, Charlotte crossed her arms under her chin and gave a negative answer. The whole class began to buzz. The teacher reminded Akira about propriety. Sitting in her chair, homeroom teacher Miyu Hanazawa reprimanded him. Akira was noisy throughout the entire class period. Akihito was furious. He didn't understand why his friend was behaving this way. At one point, Akihito also joined the conversation. Turning to him, Akira began to argue at the top of his voice about his empty chatter. Miyu quietly approached the student and grabbed him by the shoulders. She yelled at him and sternly promised to give him a private lecture on etiquette after class because he was the only one making noise in the entire classroom. Akira tearfully begged for mercy. The class laughed at him, and so did the new girl. Then she glanced at Akihito, noticing her gaze. At first, he didn't understand. Could it be true? However, there was no direct evidence. She had come from England. The world is very big, but still, it was hard to believe that there was someone so similar to her. During recess, Akira was angry with his friend, thinking that he had abandoned him. Akihito apologized. Turning his head to the right, Akihito was once again struck by Charlotte's strangeness. So young, and no language barrier. Akira asked what this barrier was. Akihito put his fist to his mouth and began to explain. Without the barrier, speech becomes natural. Then Akira asked where his friend had acquired such knowledge of English. Akihito explained various things to him. English for Japanese people and Japanese for Europeans, hiragana, katakana, kanji, and a whole bunch of other stuff. Akira was shocked and ended up agreeing with his friend. Turning around, Akihito saw Charlotte walking away through the crowd. He wanted to chat with her. Turning to his friend, he asked him not to overdo it. But the schoolboy was talking to himself. Akira was nowhere to be seen. He was already standing next to Charlotte. Akihito realized that he had been ignored. Charlotte was smiling as she talked to his friend. Akihito pushed back his chair and started reading a book. At the end of the day, a group of students from a parallel class invited the girl to go for a walk. The schoolgirl did not immediately understand what they were talking about and asked again. Someone from the group explained that they wanted to go to karaoke and celebrate her transfer. Charlotte was beaming with happiness, but there was one problem. Her sister was waiting for her at home. She was about to refuse and apologize. But Akira suggested bringing her sister along to make it more fun. Charlotte was confused. Standing aside, Akihito understood the newcomer's difficult situation. Akira didn't want to offend her, but Akihito could see the girl's confusion, and the others were being too pushy. The young man decided to smooth things over. He put his bag on a chair. He asked the guys to stop pressuring her. He said that exams were coming up soon, and they should be preparing for them instead of wasting time. Everyone had a bad impression of Akihito. Did that mean they couldn't welcome newcomers now? They called him a nerd, and for the guys, he was just ruining the whole atmosphere. After all, everyone wanted to have fun, so why should they worry? He realized his mistake. Those who think differently always cause discontent. Typical crowd psychology. Akihito said that on purpose because he didn't talk to anyone except Akira anyway. However, if they continued to push, there would be even more noise. He had to calm him down, but how? Only one person could handle this situation, and that person was Akira. Pressing his palms together, He pretended to be remorseful and suggested a celebration after the exams. One of the girls didn't understand his reasoning. Did he really feel the same way? Akira justified himself. Wasn't Akihito right? He explained his position. If they failed the tests, Charlotte would think it was because of her. The students thought about it and ultimately listened to him. Akira happily repeated his proposal, and everyone smiled in agreement. Akihito thanked him. Miyu approached him, laughing. She tugged at his tie, noting the strangeness of what was happening. After all, he was the record holder for failed tests. His behavior, according to the teacher, was commendable. Akira asked what she was doing there. He thought she had already returned to the staff room. Miyu was curious why he was so tense, so she asked him a question. Moreover, as she explained, she hadn't come for him, so he shouldn't worry. Akira breathed a sigh of relief. Miyu clarified that Akihito would also be working it off. Akihito didn't immediately understand what she meant, but the next second, he was already standing with books in the archive. He worked diligently on the task. Miyu, who was working nearby, turned to him and apologized. She had been suddenly asked to help someone else and had to find an assistant. Turning around, Akihito tried not to show it. It wasn't difficult for him, but he asked her not to scare him like that again. Crouching down, Miyu searched persistently for something and answered Akihito at the same time. If she had punished only Akira, his reputation would have fallen, but this way she killed two birds with one stone. She wondered, had he once again taken on the role of scapegoat? Why did he always take the blow himself? These questions bothered her. Akihito glanced at her. He asked when she had arrived. Miyu replied that she had arrived before he had pulled Akira aside. Akihito realized that she had been there from the beginning. At first, standing outside the classroom door, she listened to the conversation. She planned to intervene, but he was quicker. Teachers shouldn't resolve disputes between students, and she had no doubts about Akihito. Admitting honestly, she added that even now, intervention seemed to her to be the best solution. Looking at the teacher, he appeared indifferent. He didn't care. He glanced at the student. Then he returned to his search. Miyu concluded that people like him were ideal victims. She hit him on the head with a textbook. The teacher smiled and remarked that he hadn't even graduated yet, but was already a philosopher. In short, if he continued in the same vein, Miyu would lower his grades. As an antisocial student, Akihito did not understand her motives. Miyu approached the student and mentioned that in modern society, an honest person cannot survive. Smiling foolishly, Akihito did not understand why a person with such beliefs would work as a teacher. While Miyu continued to pore over her books, Akihito watched her. Feeling his gaze, she turned around and asked if he was thinking nasty things about her. Akihito waved her off. Returning to her work, Miyu decided that she had imagined it and continued her lecture. He should value himself more. After all, he was a good guy. Looking up, he disagreed with her. He did value himself. Walking down the street, he heard a child's cry. Akihito thought, perhaps it was English? He turned the corner of the house. He found a crying girl who was calling for Lottie. Passers-by walked by with puzzled looks on their faces. None of them knew English. He quickly went over to the girl. He sat down next to her and asked what had happened. Had she lost someone? The girl stopped crying, but she got scared and ran away, hiding behind a concrete column. Akihito scolded himself. It frightened her. The young man gently asked her not to worry, peeking out from behind her hiding place. The girl asked who he was. To gain the child's trust, the young man smiled, introduced himself, and learned her name in return. The girl's name was Emma. Akihito asked where she had lost Lottie. All Emma could manage through her tears was that Lottie was lost. When asked where exactly, the girl became hysterical again. Then Akihito realized that he needed to distract her. He showed her a picture of a kitten. He asked if she liked them. The girl smiled and said yes. She beamed with happiness as she looked at the picture. The young man noticed her silver hair and facial features. She looked remarkably like the new girl. Could she be her sister? Akihito asked her last name. At first, the girl didn't hear him, but then she said, Charlotte. Akihito immediately remembered Charlotte. The surname was identical. Standing up, the young man confidently offered to take Emma to Lottie. The girl asked again, and upon hearing the confirmation, she literally lit up with joy. Sitting down again, Akihito asked what she wanted. The girl looked into the distance. Then she turned around and held out her hand, saying here. The young man did not understand at first. Then she added, my hand. Akihito understood and took her hand. Walking down the street, Akihito told the girl to watch her step. As they walked, Emma looked at a cat on her phone. Suddenly, she stopped and returned the gadget. The young man couldn't believe that time had flown by so quickly during their calm conversation. The little girl had already looked at all the pictures, and she commanded him to pick her up. Akihito did not expect such spontaneity, but he had no choice. So he obediently picked her up. That's how they got to school. In the staff room, Miyu barely glanced at the little girl. She realized that she was lost. Akihito added that he found her crying in the middle of the street. Miyu sat down and asked the child's name. Akihito answered for her, Emma. The girl was nervous about the formal atmosphere and tried to figure out who this woman was. Akihito turned the little girl's attention to himself and asked if she knew who teachers were. The little girl replied that they were people who taught everyone. Akihito praised her, calling her clever. We stroked her head, Emma laughed. Miyu jokingly threatened them. Then she suddenly grabbed her stomach and doubled over with laughter or exhaustion. Soon they were sitting on couches facing each other. Miyu pieced together the events in her head. Akihito had guessed that the girl was Charlotte's sister and decided to bring her to school. Akihito confirmed her thoughts, and Miyu added that Charlotte had already called them and reported her sister missing. As soon as Miyu saw them, she immediately contacted Charlotte. The young man noted her efficiency to himself. Less than a minute later, Charlotte rushed into the office. Her eyes were filled with terror, and she was drenched in sweat from running. The girl cried out her sister's name in fear. Miyu approached and calmed her down. Emma was sleeping peacefully on the sofa. Walking deeper into the room, Charlotte saw Akihito and her sister sleeping next to him. She looked at them fondly. Akihito asked about her condition. The girl apologized and admitted that she felt as if a weight had been lifted from her shoulders. The guy reached out his hand to her in support. In response, Charlotte briefly placed her hand on his and thanked him. But then she quickly pulled away. She felt embarrassed because her hands had become sweaty while she was running around looking for him. But Akihito didn't mind. He understood her feelings. The girl looked at him silently. Akihito felt awkward and asked her directly what was wrong. Folding her hands together and looking away, she whispered what a good person he was. At the end, Charlotte called him by name and asked if he had found Emma. Akihito was amazed. She remembered his name. Charlotte then thanked him again for his help in class, and here. She was pleased to realize that he was someone she could really rely on. Her words made the guy blush. Miyu couldn't help but notice his blush and suggested capturing the moment. Akihito refused, unwilling to put up with it. He intended to leave and had already said goodbye to the girls. Emma stopped him. With a sad face, she asked if he was leaving. Sitting down on the sofa, the guy apologized, but he had to go home, especially since Lottie had arrived and she had nothing to worry about. Emma hugged him. Holding Akihito's hand, she happily called her sister over. Akihito didn't understand the reason for Emma's behavior, so he asked Charlotte. Watching her sister, she replied that it was strong affection. Akihito understood. Charlotte asked a clarifying question. So his name was Akihito? After thinking for a split second, Charlotte crouched down and gave her sister permission to call him Oni-chan. Emma asked again, and so did Akihito. Charlotte apologized, deciding to correct herself, as she thought it was not customary for younger siblings to address their older siblings by name in Japan. Akihito understood what she was talking about. Meanwhile, Charlotte taught her how to pronounce the word Oni-chan. Charlotte praised her sister for her efforts. Holding Emma's hand, she smiled and looked at Akihito, and she affectionately said, Oni-chan. Miyu and the young man were overwhelmed by such cuteness. Miyu heard it quite by accident. She was just going to wash her mug. Charlotte praised Emma, but they had to go home. Now Emma had to let go of her hand. The girl had no intention of doing so. She cried out that she would not let go. Emma declared that she would only go home with Oni-chan. Charlotte and Akihito shouted in unison, what? Miyu said seriously that everything was clear to her now, and he could go home. Akihito begged her not to joke like that. Miyu asked ironically if she was joking. It seemed obvious to her that as soon as they got there, Emma would start acting up again. The teacher insisted that he look at the situation from another perspective. In short, she implied that if he agreed, he would learn something interesting. Akihito asked in shock, what? Standing aside, Charlotte shyly said his name. Turning around, Charlotte timidly asked him to see them off if it wasn't too much trouble. To walk them home if it wasn't too much trouble. To be more convincing, she clasped her hands together and looked at him imploringly. Akihito almost cried out in surprise. He didn't understand if she was serious. The girl bowed her head and added that she humbly asked for his help. 1,000 thoughts raced through the young man's mind. How did it come to this? Should he go alone or with the three of them? What would passers-by think when they saw him with such a beauty? His brain was clearly not prepared for such situations. In the end, he gave in. He agreed. Akihito asked, well, shall we go? Charlotte confirmed and thanked him again. In his heart, Akihito wept, hoping that it was all just a dream. Charlotte smiled. At that moment, Emma approached Akihito. She spread her arms wide. He guessed that the little girl wanted to be picked up, but decided to check. Clinging to him, the girl confirmed his guess. It wasn't difficult for him. Charlotte tried to call her sister back. She told her not to bother the young man and to walk beside him. But Emma, whimpering, rushed back to Akihito. He crouched down to hug her, reassuring her that everything was fine. However, Charlotte was still against it, worried about the inconvenience. Lowering her head, she explained that she just felt awkward burdening him. Putting his hand on Emma's head, Akihito smiled broadly and insisted that this way they would get there faster. Charlotte blushed and finally agreed. The next moment, Emma was already sitting in his arms, laughing happily. Walking down the street, Charlotte still felt awkward. She apologized for her sister's behavior and promised to have a serious talk with her at home. Akihito, smiling broadly, insisted that he was only happy to help. Blushing, the girl remarked again how kind he was. Emma, however, was unhappy. She didn't understand their conversation because they were speaking Japanese. Akihito apologized and switched to English. Charlotte noted that he had excellent pronunciation. Akihito praised her progress in Japanese and asked where she had learned the language so well. It turned out that her parents had taught her. Emma immediately proclaimed enthusiastically that she also wanted to learn Japanese. Akihito encouraged her, and the happy girl rushed into his arms again. To him, she was like an affectionate kitten. Noticing Charlotte looking anxiously at her sister, Akihito asked her why her mood had changed. Charlotte admitted that she was amazed at how quickly Emma had become attached to him. Akihito suggested that the girl was just friendly with everyone, but Charlotte objected. Emma didn't usually reach out to strangers. While Emma laughed, Charlotte tried to make sense of what had happened. Akihito reminded her of the picture with the cat, but the girl shook her head. One picture was hardly enough. For a second, their eyes met. Charlotte realized, most likely it was because he was a very kind and sincere guy. Stammering with embarrassment, Akihito asked again why she thought so. Charlotte, blushing deeply, confirmed, that's exactly why Emma became attached to him. He's very kind. Stunned by these words, Akihito, overcome with joy, involuntarily put his hand on the girl's shoulder. She immediately pulled away. He didn't immediately understand why she did that, and Charlotte tried to explain something indistinctly. She just felt awkward. The guy quickly apologized. The girl asked, what is he apologizing for? Akihito explained, apparently, she doesn't like him very much. Charlotte realized she had ruined everything. She tried to get closer, passionately explaining that it wasn't like that at all. She didn't distance herself because she had a bad attitude toward him. So what was the real reason? After asking this question, the guy was about to leave. Fiddling with her fingers, she whispered that she was just shy. Charlotte remembered that she had sweated while running and felt embarrassed. She lowered her head, and her face turned bright red. Akihito thought it was incredibly cute. When they approached the house, she folded her hands in front of her again, imploringly. Finally, the girl expressed her gratitude once more. The young man just waved her off. He had helped Emma by accident, and she had already thanked him for that. But Charlotte disagreed. She reminded him of how he had stood up for her in class. Akihito was lost in thought. Inviting someone to go for a walk is normal, but forcing them is wrong, even though Akira didn't do it out of malice. Charlotte objected. She was pleased that they wanted to throw a party in her honor, but she felt sorry for Akihito because he got in trouble for it. Akihito urged her not to worry because he had done what he thought was right. He mentioned once again what a good person he was. She asked him to accept her gratitude and held out her hand. Akihito didn't quite understand what was going on, so he just shook her hand. Meanwhile, they approached the building. To be sure, the young man asked for directions. The group went up to the third floor. Charlotte explained that she lived there and asked them to wait a minute. She went to unlock the door. A few seconds later, she happily exclaimed that the door was already open. Akihito simply replied, "Oh, okay," showing him the key. Charlotte announced that they were now neighbors. Akihito was stunned. So that's what it was all about. Charlotte gently picked up her sleeping sister and thanked him again for his help. Deep down, Akihito was immensely happy. He was so lucky that he even felt a little scared for his future. In the evening, Charlotte came to Akihito's place with Emma. Charlotte politely apologized for the sudden intrusion. Emma stood behind her and excitedly announced their visit. Akihito looked serious and uttered the long-awaited word, "Come in." Once inside, the girl ran around the room with joy. Charlotte looked around the living room and admired it. She did not expect to see such a luxurious room in a guy's apartment. Before entering, Charlotte sadly explained that when she was putting her sister to bed, she didn't want to go to sleep, saying she wanted to play with him. The guy had already heard her words through the wall, so, understanding the situation, he welcomed them into his apartment. Akihito came to the conclusion that this was what had led to it. Meanwhile, Emma patted the rug lying by the table. With this gesture, she motioned for Oniai-chan to sit down. When he sat down, She ordered him to spread his arms. He obediently followed her instructions. Emma jumped on him with her arms around him, giggling quietly. Akihito didn't like it at all. He felt uncomfortable. Seeing Akihito's reaction, Charlotte hastened to reprimand her sister. The girl did not listen. In response to her sister's words, she shouted emphatically, "No." Charlotte sat down and once again told her to stop inconveniencing people. Emma said the same thing and added that Lottie was a troublemaker. Charlotte didn't consider herself to be one. She justified her sister's response by saying that she simply didn't want to inconvenience people. Besides, Emma was completely sure of her brother's wishes. Nevertheless, she checked with him. Akihito laughed. Emma looked at him with puppy dog eyes, asking his name. He suddenly understood and told her to sit down and that everything was fine. Charlotte repeated that he was being overly kind. Akihito waved it off. It wasn't difficult for him. She expressed her gratitude and asked permission to sit down. Akihito froze at what he heard. He already imagined Charlotte sitting on him. He shouted, "On him!" The girl blushed and clarified that she just wanted to sit down. The young man cried out with relief that that was what he had thought, and that she could sit wherever she wanted. Charlotte sat down at the table opposite him and looked at him. Akihito was glad he wasn't sitting next to her. Otherwise, he wouldn't have been able to handle it. While they were looking at each other, Emma approached and tugged slightly at Akihito's sleeve. She asked him to play with her. He agreed and asked what she would like to play. The girl repeated the same thing. Akihito didn't understand. Charlotte smiled and said that the girl would want to play anything, as long as it was with him. Akihito asked the girl in surprise if that was true. She proudly confirmed it. However, Akihito had no idea what to play with her, so he asked Charlotte what they usually played. Charlotte told him about her sister's favorite game, dominoes. Now Akihito had another question. What kind of dominoes were they talking about? He anxiously said that he didn't have any dominoes at home. This wasn't a problem for them. They had dominoes at home, so Charlotte went to get them. When the door closed, Akihito felt comforted by her incredible kindness. Emma confirmed the same thing. He asked if she loved her sister. The girl said cheerfully, "Yes, very much." A few seconds later, Charlotte happily announced her arrival and, walking into the room, placed the dominoes on the table. Akihito suggested starting the game, but the girl was no longer very interested. She looked at him blankly. He asked her if they were going to play. Emma asked to be picked up. Akihito suggested that Emma no longer wanted to play. Charlotte intervened and told him about their game. It turned out that Emma was eager to watch the dominoes fall with him. The young man objected. He knew that in their homeland they played differently. Charlotte, laughing, agreed, but not for her sister. Akihito checked. So she just wants to look? Charlotte confirmed that she didn't like arranging things, so she was asking her to do it. After listening to her, Akihito concluded that the child was spoiled, but Charlotte said that her sister was so cute that she couldn't refuse her. Charlotte arranged the dominoes. To Emma, it seemed like something magical. She watched the process with amazement. Akihito also stared. In his mind, he emphasized her talent in this matter. When it was finished, Emma smiled sweetly, and that smile stuck in Akihito's memory. Charlotte noted their closeness. In her opinion, it was thanks to Akihito that Emma was truly happy. The young man did not expect such recognition. He thought the little girl was very cute and simply did not want to spoil her joy. Charlotte sincerely added how great it was to have an Oni-chan like him. Akihito was very pleased to hear these words. Soon Charlotte announced that she had placed the last domino. As she left, she warned about her sister's move. Charlotte had worked long and hard to line up the dominoes, but as soon as Emma waved her hand, all her efforts were undone. The little girl was delighted with her work and clapped her hands happily. Charlotte rejoiced with her, and only Akihito was slightly shocked. Emma murmured something softly to her sister. Charlotte understood the hint. It was clear from her tone that the girl wanted to play again. Then Emma turned to Oni-chan. Noticing her condition, he asked what was wrong, and she, burying her face in his arms, quietly replied, "Nothing." Akihito sat there, struck by her spontaneity. To him, she was an angel incarnate. Charlotte noticed that Emma blossomed when he was around, although there was a hint of doubt in her voice. Pulling away from him, Emma suddenly confessed her love to him. Akihito couldn't hold back and burst into tears. His eyes instantly filled with tears. Emma looked at him in alarm, not understanding the reason for his tears. So as not to upset the child, he quickly wiped his eyes and forced himself to smile. Everyone's attention shifted back to Charlotte. She announced that the dominoes were set up again. Emma was beside herself with happiness. She poked the last piece with her finger, and in a matter of seconds, everything fell apart. Meanwhile, Akihito tried to pull himself together. A little more time passed, and the new neighbors got ready to leave. The baby was already sleeping peacefully in her sister's arms. Charlotte sincerely thanked Akihito for everything, to which he modestly replied, "You're welcome." However, the girl insisted, thanking him for the time spent with Emma. For Akihito, it was nothing because he had enjoyed himself too. But Charlotte called him a real hero. She admitted that she was very worried about her sister in Japan, fearing that she would not be understood because of the language barrier. But Akihito found a way to communicate with her. Then the girl looked at him plaintively and asked an important question. Could he play with Emma sometimes until she got used to it? Akihito froze, analyzing his options. He understood that it was really difficult for the little girl, but his studies were his priority. On the other hand, Charlotte was so kind and always thought of others. In the end, Akihito agreed to help in his free time. The girl beamed. She was already getting ready to leave. She was afraid that his family would return soon and she would feel awkward meeting them. But Akihito, standing behind her, replied that no one would come. Charlotte turned around in surprise and asked why. The boy explained that he lived alone. Charlotte was amazed because he was just a high school student. Akihito agreed, but he added that he didn't see anything unusual about it. The girl silently turned toward the exit. But suddenly, the silence was broken by a loud rumbling in Akihito's stomach. Embarrassed, the guy blushed and crouched down, sighing involuntarily. Charlotte immediately approached him, apologizing for making him forget about dinner. Akihito assured her that everything was fine and that he was just going to the 24-hour store. The girl glanced at her phone. It was almost 10 p.m. She tried to dissuade him, saying that it was late and might be unsafe outside. Akihito tried to argue that Japan was safe, but Charlotte couldn't just let it go. Suddenly, an idea came to her, and she said she could make dinner. The young man seemed to freeze, thinking he was dreaming. Noticing his puzzled expression, the girl became slightly upset and asked if he minded. Akihito didn't even know how to respond. The thought of the girl standing at the stove for him made him blush. Reluctantly, he said, "I'd love to." Charlotte beamed with happiness and uttered a somewhat triumphant sound. Charlotte stood in the kitchen wearing an apron and with her hair tied back. She diligently prepared dinner. Meanwhile, tears of joy streamed down Akihito's face. Everything that was happening seemed like a dream to him. He sat there lost in thought. It seemed to him that he had used up all his luck for the rest of his life. While he was thinking, the girl approached him from behind. She interrupted him. She asked if there were any foods he didn't eat. Akihito excitedly said that he was an omnivore. Charlotte didn't understand what was wrong with him. She asked him directly what was wrong because his voice had changed. Akihito replied that nothing was wrong and smiled slyly. Charlotte tensed up. Without pressing further, she continued cooking. Akihito went to check on Emma. She was fast asleep. Akihito carefully wiped the saliva from her mouth and adjusted her blanket. When he was done, he looked at her. He was happy to see her sleeping so sweetly. He wanted a little sister too. Suddenly, Charlotte leaned over to the young man and whispered in his ear, "Don't be naughty." Akihito froze in horror. He immediately blushed. Rubbing his ear, he asked her not to do that. She laughed and apologized. The reason was that she wanted to fool around. Akihito noted that she was a mischievous girl. Charlotte thought for a moment. She asked if he thought so. Charlotte put her finger to her lips and asked why she would want to tease him in particular. And she turned away. Akihito asked again. Charlotte said, "Yes, nothing." Then she called him over to the table. There were a lot of dishes on the table. The guy was surprised. While he was eating, Charlotte folded her apron. Watching her, the guy was very curious about what she meant. Taking the chopsticks, he began to eat rice. Akihito exclaimed that it was so delicious. The girl was pleased to hear this. Akihito ate faster than a train because he was so hungry. Akihito also added that she was good at making Japanese dishes. Charlotte explained that she loved Japanese food and Japanese cuisine. Then Akihito became curious as to why that was. After talking, Charlotte said that she originally wanted to cook potatoes with meat but couldn't find the necessary ingredients. In her opinion, it was a favorite dish of Japanese guys. Akihito asked again. Charlotte added that she wanted to please him. Akihito was even more surprised. Where did she get such prejudices? For the rest of the dinner, he ate in silence, while the girl looked at him and then away. Taking a bite of meat, Akihito thought that he didn't care about her prejudices. He felt happy. At the end of dinner, she thanked him. Akihito replied in kind. He was pleased to have eaten such delicious food. Charlotte was happy, even though she couldn't thank him with anything special. Akihito felt awkward and was already feeling anxious. The girl added that thanks to him, everything was fine with her sister. If she had disappeared, Charlotte would not have been able to cope. Akihito understood her. It was rare to see a foreign woman on the street, and such a nice one at that. God forbid, she could have been kidnapped. Charlotte agreed. She was hard to miss. Akihito thought Well, yes, that means she would be safe in crowded places. As he said earlier, Japan is safe. Even if she got lost again, she would most likely be taken to the police station. In the end, he smiled. Charlotte emphasized his kindness again. Akihito shyly denied it. But Charlotte told him not to be ashamed, and it was true. As soon as Akihito felt uneasy, he began to support her. Akihito added that anyone would have done the same. Even Charlotte knew that not all people were good. Some were superficial, others sincere. According to Charlotte, Akihito was one of the latter. Looking up, Akihito didn't immediately know what to offer in return for the praise. Charlotte smiled and said she didn't need anything. But if he really wanted to, they could become friends with Akihito's consent. The guy agreed without hesitation. It was time to leave. As Charlotte was leaving, Akihito stopped her. Charlotte asked what was wrong. Akihito suggested that they not talk at school. At these words, the girl's expression changed instantly, and she asked in surprise. Akihito explained that if they talked at school, the other students would pester her with questions, and she would have no peace. Charlotte suggested telling everyone the truth. He rejected this idea too, because rumors would spread that they lived next door to each other. Akihito didn't want that to happen. Charlotte was very upset, but if he thought it would be better that way. Having closed the subject, they wished each other good night and went their separate ways. She approached her sister. She realized how exhausted she was. The next day, when she arrived at school, Miyu read Charlotte's personal file. The address seemed familiar to her. Akihito lived nearby. As agreed, she pretended not to know him and asked her homeroom teacher about him. Miyu completely forgot herself and said his name out loud. She said he was a boy in her class. He was also the most problematic student in the school. The schoolgirl couldn't believe her ears. Yesterday, he seemed completely different. One of the teachers intervened in their conversation. She ordered them to stop scaring him and to stop bullying foreigners. She reassured the girl, saying that he was the best student in the school. This teacher's name was Ms. Sasagawa. She exuded an aura of kindness and care. She was happy to meet the new student. Charlotte felt uncomfortable. It was her first day, and she was already being teased. After thinking for a moment, Miyu added that he was still a problem. The girl asked what Akihito was really like. Miyu said, "You could say he's a genius." Charlotte guessed that this was not entirely true, for which she received praise from the teacher. Miyu advised her to rely on him if she had any problems. Charlotte started to object, but was interrupted. Miyu told her not to worry. Akihito may be eccentric, but he won't leave her in trouble. Charlotte still didn't understand what she was saying. A minute ago, she was talking about how problematic he was. Not wanting to pursue the topic further, she simply let her know that she understood. Miyu, in turn, gave her another piece of advice. Don't take his words at face value. Charlotte still didn't get it. Did that mean she shouldn't trust him? Miyu leaned on the table and said that she could trust him, but he should know that he sees the world differently. And that's why he acts with an eye to the future. And when he expresses disagreement, he does so deliberately. Stepping aside and standing with her back to the schoolgirl, Miyu continued, even if he is criticized. At that moment, she poked the girl, and then she pushed her. These actions were accompanied by speech, read between the lines. Charlotte figured it all out. So he was deliberately putting himself in a bad light? Miyu called the girl smart, but Charlotte was interested in why he was doing it. Miyu sighed heavily and said that only he knew the truth. Charlotte kept asking questions. She wondered why they had told her about it. Miyu made excuses about something like intuition, and Ms. Sasagawa rephrased what she had said, in case they become friends. Miyu confirmed this. Ms. Sasagawa growled that it was her animal instinct, and reached out to Miyu. Then Miyu put her hand on her colleague's head. Charlotte was frightened. Miyu said ominously, "This instinct, right?" The schoolgirl felt like she was in a comic book. Sasagawa tearfully begged to be let go, the way she could tear her head off. Miyu was very angry with her. Her colleague addressed her by name, and that made her furious. Miyu turned to the girl and warned her to beware of her. She has a thing for girls. Charlotte said, "Okay." Miyu was struck by her weak reaction. She replied that same-sex marriage was legal in her country, and that was fine. Miyu emphasized her peculiarity. Charlotte looked at her expressively. Then she put the documents on the table and told her to leave. Before leaving, Charlotte asked to let Sasagawa go. She noticed something fly out of her. Miyu smiled and insisted not to worry. The lady was used to it. They had been friends since childhood. After letting her friend go, Miyu returned to her conversation with Charlotte. She understood perfectly how difficult it was to adapt to a new country. Nevertheless, if she needed anything, Charlotte should not hesitate to ask. It didn't matter if it was about school or personal matters. Charlotte smiled and thanked her. Convinced that the conversation was over, she headed for the exit. Miyu stopped her. She told her to find a boyfriend, since she was here anyway. The girl turned around, and her face flushed. This amused Miyu even more. She was curious. Did Charlotte really not date anyone? Charlotte answered in the affirmative, putting her fist under her cheek. Miyu looked at her and assured her that guys would be drooling over her. Embarrassed, the girl covered her face with her hands and mumbled something. Sasagawa intervened. She couldn't believe that Miyu still liked to tease pretty kids like she did in elementary school. Miyu asked impatiently what she was babbling about. Sasagawa replied, "Nothing really. It's just that Miyu herself is in denial about her own problems. She still doesn't have a boyfriend." Miyu noted that one scolding was clearly not enough for her friend and already clenched her fists. Sasagawa rushed to Charlotte for help to prevent violence. Charlotte was uncomfortable listening to all this and asked them not to shout like that in the staff room. Miyu stated, "It's like a painting, a student scolding a teacher." Ms. Sasagawa began to get angry, blaming Miyu as well. Miyu simply replied, "Isn't she the only one?" Charlotte was already getting ready to leave. Remembering that the student was still there, the friends turned to her. Miyu apologized for the commotion and added that the school was full of weirdos, so she shouldn't worry. Sasagawa looked at her friend indignantly. Charlotte laughed, although she still didn't understand who Miyu was referring to. When Charlotte left, Miyu shared her guess with her friend. She took the piece of paper and looked at it closely. She voiced her thought. In her opinion, Charlotte would be able to influence Akihito. Back home, the girl was on cloud 9. She hugged the pillow tightly to her chest. In her eyes, Akihito seemed much better than people said he was. He was really very kind, and she wanted to be friends with him. There was only one thing that bothered her. What did he mean by, "I wouldn't want that to happen"? When she entered the classroom, Miyu scratched her head and said, "I think that's everything." She looked at a piece of paper lying on her desk. Akihito was dissatisfied with her. How could someone like that be a teacher? Looking around the classroom, he noticed Charlotte. She waved at him in a friendly manner. Akihito became nervous. He had decided not to interact with her at school, but he reached out his hand. Their attention shifted to the teacher. She announced that the lesson was about to begin. She called Akihito over to her. At first, he didn't understand. The second time, he was told to move his butt. The rest of the class had to sit quietly until the teacher arrived. Akihito excitedly asked what had happened. Miyu mentioned his friendship with Charlotte. He didn't understand what she was getting at. She turned to him and asked, does he think she didn't notice how she smiled and waved? Akihito thought that the teacher wasn't looking, but she was. His silly smile gave him away. Akihito dismissed it until the very end. He tried to convince her that she was imagining things. Miyu wasn't fooled, but only emphasized her point. He was smiling at her with his eyes. Akihito yelled at her. He didn't like that she was making it seem like he was a pervert. Miyu didn't realize what was wrong. Akihito yelled, asking if she even heard herself talking. Miyu changed the subject. She put her hands on his shoulders and told him to take care of her. Akihito objected. She was an independent girl, so she could handle it herself. Miyu tried to get through to him. She wasn't Japanese, and foreigners tend to fear misunderstandings or harassment, especially with her appearance. When she mentioned her appearance, he immediately remembered her smile. It made him blush. He agreed, although he wasn't good at it, but he promised to keep an eye on her. Miyu wished him luck. Miyu leaned against the wall and wished that everyone were like him. The schoolboy felt uncomfortable. He was about to leave because class was starting, but Miyu stopped him. Finally, she told him not to forget about her too. She entrusted Charlotte to him, but that didn't mean he had to sacrifice himself for her. He paused for a few seconds, then replied that it was his responsibility. It was an answer and an action. Miyu was silent at first. Then she said, did he think that giving happiness to an unsuspecting person was atonement? Their conversation abruptly shifted to Akihito's friend. According to him, Akira was the main victim, and he wouldn't care about himself as long as Akira was happy. Miyu repeated irritably that he was the victim. Akihito demanded that they drop the subject. Miyu continued. She knew his past. It didn't matter if he was an outsider. Stubborn as a bull. Still, Miyu insisted that he remember. No matter what he said, she would be on his side. The guy felt ashamed and apologized. He felt he had said too much. Miyu waved it off. She knew he hadn't meant to. Still, she urged him not to take on too much. Akihito protested. He was being sincere. Miyu didn't believe him and patted him on the head, saying, yes, we'll write it down. As she left, she felt calmer. The boy was curious as to why. Turning around, she told him she knew he was changing his mind. Let it take a long time. Akihito remained silent. In the evening, sitting at home, Emma asked if they would go to Oni-chan's house to play. Charlotte put the book on her lap and said they wouldn't go because he had his own things to do and they played at his place every day anyway. Emma just sighed resentfully. Her sister told her to stop sulking. She motivated her sister by saying that if she behaved herself, They would go to his place in the evening. After a while, Charlotte called her sister to go shopping. At that time, she lay silently and drew. Emma tried to behave herself. The girl got dressed by herself. Charlotte praised her, and, taking her by the hand, they left. Only she and her mother were allowed to hold Emma's hand. She doesn't let anyone else. Although she seemed to have a special relationship with Akihito, Charlotte assumed that Akihito was probably loved because of his kindness. Walking down the hallway, Charlotte turned and asked her sister what she wanted for dinner. However, her sister was not there. Charlotte was already starting to panic. Charlotte looked the other way and saw her sister. Emma was standing with a broom and pressing the doorbell button. Charlotte noticed her and yelled at her, asking what she was doing. After several attempts, Emma finally hit the button, and she was happy. She demanded to be let go. Charlotte tried to calm her sister down. The sister stood up and called Charlotte a troublemaker. She wanted to play with Oni-chan. Charlotte demanded that she stop bothering him. While they were arguing, Akihito came out of the door. He greeted them cautiously. When Emma saw him, she ran to hug him. Akihito invited them to visit. Charlotte, feeling shy, agreed. Akihito sat down and greeted the little girl. She greeted him back and reached out her hands. Akihito asked her what she wanted. She replied that she wanted to be picked up. In his mind, it was obvious. The girl laughed. Charlotte stood there looking sad. Seeing this, he invited her into the apartment and told her not to be shy. Once inside, she saw his notebook covered in writing and asked if he was doing his homework. Akihito explained that he had nothing else to do, so he decided to study. Charlotte apologized for the inconvenience. Akihito waved it off. They were neighbors, after all. He wasn't afraid. He could study at night. He invited Charlotte to sit down. Emma turned to her brother and complained about her sister. Lottie was noisy, according to her. Charlotte looked at her sister indignantly. Akihito figured they had quarreled. Charlotte smiled as she had a serious conversation with her sister at home. The girl snuggled up to her brother and whined that her sister wanted to torment her. Charlotte sat there tormented and resentfully said that she was always bad. Unable to take it anymore, Charlotte began to whine. They interrupted her, and Akihito tried to comfort her. He said that everything was fine and there was no need to worry. She fixed her hair. She turned back and thanked him with a smile. Akihito said that Charlotte would no longer be there. The girl took it as if he was abandoning her. On top of that, she started crying. Akihito reassured her, promising that Charlotte wouldn't scold her. Emma didn't believe his words. Lottie intervened. What is Emma talking about? She never scolded her seriously. Akihito continued to support her. He promised that he would always be on her side and that Charlotte was the kindest person. Emma asked if he would protect her. Akihito replied, of course. The little girl joyfully exclaimed her love for him. Looking at this scene, Charlotte realized what a femme fatale Emma would be. Akihito didn't hear her and asked her to repeat it, to which Charlotte replied, no, nothing special. Emma took all the attention again. When asked, what is it? She expressed her desire to eat with him. Charlotte pushed her sister away. They had caused too much trouble. Emma was struggling to break free. Akihito knew a lot about children, so he said that children sometimes act up. That's normal. Emma called him kind. She turned her head and said that her sister wasn't like that. Charlotte resorted to extreme measures. She smiled slyly and gave him a cunning look. She said ominously, Mom dear, have you become brave now that Akihito is around? The guy was shocked by this scene. Emma burst into tears. Akihito changed the subject and asked about their plans for dinner. And then his words reminded her. They were going to go to the store. Since they were already there, Charlotte asked if he wanted to eat together. The guy gladly agreed. Charlotte had already announced her departure, so Akihito suggested they go together. Charlotte tried to object, but Akihito interrupted her. He wanted to help her carry the bags. She shouldn't have to carry such heavy things. There were no more objections. Akihito asked which store they were going to. Charlotte replied that they were going to the nearest one, as it would be quicker. Emma asked if she would buy her some treats. Her sister gave an ambiguous answer. This was due to her disobedient behavior. Emma cried and rushed to complain to her brother. To finally make peace with the little girl, Charlotte suggested apologizing first. Emma was indignant. She didn't think she was to blame. Akihito explained that Charlotte was hurt and that her apology would help her. Emma thought about the suggestion. She took a couple of steps, and with difficulty, she managed to say, I'm sorry. Charlotte was amazed and apologized in return. Outside, Charlotte reached out to hug her sister, but she refused, expressing her desire to be with her brother. Akihito encouraged her. It's okay, she's just a little girl. So as not to bother him, she simply let him know that she understood. Walking through the store, Charlotte was visibly shaken. Emma, looking into Oni-chan's eyes, she said she wanted to eat. Akihito tried to persuade her to wait. They would be back soon and would make something. It didn't help Emma, and she continued to whine. Charlotte apologized and encouraged her with the same words as the boy. The young man called her clever and asked if she could wait. The little girl asked again, and the young man pressed her head against him and said, "Of course, especially when you're home alone." Emma repeated jubilantly that she was a good girl. The guy confirmed it and asked her to wait. For a second, he doubted that it would work, but it turned out not to be the case. Emma was already sure she could handle it because she was smart. To lift her spirits even more, Akihito suggested watching a video with cats. The girl was delighted. Charlotte watched silently. She praised him, saying how incredible he was. He opened his eyes wide. He saw Charlotte standing just a few inches away, staring at him. Surprised, he uttered her name in astonishment. Charlotte continued to praise him. He never raises his voice. He just guides her to the right decisions. It's amazing and not easy. He repeated, "Come on, anyone would have done that." From the girl's point of view, he wasn't just anyone, in Emma's case. Akihito reminded her why they had come and asked what she wanted to cook. She thought about it and asked for the guy's opinion. He was about to say ramen, but stopped. He thought carefully about how to respond. Otherwise, she would turn ordinary ramen into a royal feast. Charlotte asked again. Then the young man left the choice to Emma. The girl cheerfully shouted that she wanted hamburger steak. Charlotte smiled and picked up the ground beef. She was going to cook what the guy asked for, but she didn't mind hamburger steak herself. Emma reminded her about the treats. Charlotte raised her finger threateningly and promised to buy only a little. But deep down, the young man knew she would buy more. At home, Emma talked nonstop about hamburger steak. She was very happy about it. Akihito asked her about her great love for hamburger steaks. She confirmed it. He put his hand on her head and told her to sit quietly and wait. The little girl obeyed him. While they waited, Emma suggested watching cats. Akihito turned on his phone. The little girl watched and was charmed. A few seconds later, Charlotte called them to the table. Emma was engrossed in the cats. Akihito told her that dinner was ready. The girl wanted to watch until the end. Her sister reassured her, saying that the cats weren't going anywhere. She asked if she was going to eat. Emma replied that she was watching the cats for now. In that case, her sister decided to eat her hamburger steak. After all, seals are more important than food that can spoil, so the hamburger steak was hers. Emma immediately changed her mind. Now she was trying to take her portion back. Charlotte reminded her that she had said earlier that the seals were more important than food. Emma quickly sat down at the table. Now for her, the seals could wait, but the hamburger steak could not. In the end, she was allowed to sit down and eat. Lottie folded her hands together. Emma didn't understand what that meant. Then they wished each other bon appetit. After dinner, Charlotte washed the dishes. Akihito emphasized how cute Emma looked when she was asleep. She had fallen asleep right on top of him, and he took it as a sign of her trust. Charlotte agreed with him. She quietly approached him. She apologized for scaring him earlier, adding that Emma trusts him a lot, even adored him. Charlotte turned to him again. Since Emma was fast asleep, why not go for a walk? If he didn't mind. Once outside, it was clear that night had fallen and the moon was shining brightly. Charlotte noticed the pleasant breeze. Akihito agreed. He moved on to talking about dinner, praising the food. The girl was pleased to hear such comments. He was most attracted to the spinach pie. It looked beautiful and delicious. Charlotte explained that Emma loved this particular pie with hamburger steak. Akihito was slightly taken aback, noting that she remembered her younger sister's preferences perfectly. Charlotte waved it off. She said it wasn't about memory at all. She just didn't want to see Emma alone and sad. She wanted her sister to enjoy life without any problems. Carrying the girl in his arms, he listened attentively to her words. Akihito emphasized what a caring sister Charlotte was. He confidently asserted that Emma definitely felt her attention. Charlotte doubted this, believing that her sister probably thought she was strict. Akihito reassured her, saying that she shouldn't take her words to heart. On the contrary, it shows how deep the bond between the sisters is. Charlotte was confused. He explained it more simply. She had nothing to be ashamed of in her feelings toward her sister, since she was free to express her emotions. This made Charlotte doubtful. After all, being capricious with people you dislike is a completely different matter. Akihito believed that this was a different situation. Perhaps he was wrong, but from the very first day he met them, he had the impression that the two girls were close to each other. Once, Emma told him that she loved her older sister for her kindness. Charlotte could hardly believe it. After listening to his monologue, she began to admire him. He turned out to be a truly unusual person, capable of saying such things. Akihito became nervous, thinking that he had accidentally blurted out something stupid. He had misinterpreted the situation. Talking to him made her feel better. Calmness permeated her soul. So it was no surprise that Emma became so attached to him. She admitted frankly that she didn't know how to communicate with guys at all. Their gaze always seemed scary to her. However, Akihito's eyes were completely different. They were full of kindness. That's why she called him so special. For the first time, she felt so comfortable around someone. Charlotte tried to stop the flow of thoughts. Deciding that she had said too much, she quietly laughed at herself. Akihito thanked her for her honesty. He was pleased to hear it. At first, Charlotte almost didn't believe the sincerity of his words. There was a slight pause. Finally, Akihito decided to ask what she liked to do in her free time. Charlotte asked for a minute to think. It turned out that she loved reading manga. Akihito was surprised by what he heard. He apologized, saying he didn't understand. The girl happily continued her thought. She loves reading manga and watching anime. She also likes cosplay. Cosplayers look amazing and perfectly match the characters. She would like to try it herself. Hearing her confession, Akihito said her name in surprise. In the next scene, Charlotte was sitting in his arms. Akihito himself didn't understand how it happened. The night before, he found out that Charlotte was a big anime fan. The thought of moving to Japan made Charlotte's heart beat faster. After all, there were plenty of her favorite manga there. She could watch anime in theaters and on television, and there were so many cosplayers around. Akihito simply replied, "I see." Charlotte continued her story. She studied Japanese diligently, so she could read the original manga. She improved her conversational skills, so she could watch anime as soon as new episodes came out. She dreamed of visiting Akiba, where there are many cosplayers. She wanted to add something else, but she realized she had gotten distracted. Akihito forgot everything, but was shocked to learn that she was a real anime fan. Charlotte covered her face with her hands, feeling awkward. Once again impressed by his kindness, she noticed that he was different from everyone else. Akihito wondered why. Then Charlotte asked a question. Did he read manga? Akihito replied that he didn't, but he had read something once. Her interest grew, and she thought to herself, too colorful. She continued aloud, "I see." Charlotte apologized, and he replied, "It's okay." The next question was, why doesn't he read it? Akihito thought about it. The reason was that he didn't have enough money to buy manga. There was a silence. Charlotte made a suggestion. Curious, he waited for her to continue. Charlotte offered to lend him her manga collection. Akihito asked in amazement why. Charlotte explained that since he had no opportunity to familiarize himself with the content, he was unable to appreciate the beauty of the genre. So she decided to share her copies with him. Akihito explained that he was constantly busy with work, but it was important to Charlotte that the guy experience what she herself enjoyed, and there was hope for mutual interest. Despite everything, he agreed to give it a try. During the conversation, Emma suddenly woke up and started crying. The girl apologized for scaring the baby. And now, on this day, Emma was sleeping peacefully. Akihito noted that despite everything, the girl remained charming. Smiling, Charlotte added that he had become like a brother to her. Scratching the back of his head, he remarked that the idea sounded good. For a moment, he was embarrassed, realizing what he had said. Charlotte, noticing his confusion, assured him that if that happened, she would be sincerely happy. She would be sincerely happy. Akihito imagined Charlotte as an angel. Taking advantage of Emma's sleep, the girl began rummaging through the books in search of a suitable manga. Akihito couldn't understand why she was in such a hurry. After all, Charlotte waited until Emma fell asleep. Charlotte explained that it was because of her sister's personality. Emma would not leave him alone, especially considering that Emma herself cannot read and would get bored. And now the girl was comfortable sleeping on his lap. Having found the right book, Charlotte settled down next to him. A frightened Akihito tried to figure out why she did it. It turned out that the girl wanted to discuss the original manga plot with her friends, but no one else spoke Japanese, so she suggested they read the manga together. The young man agreed. Bringing the comic to his eyes, Akihito asked for the title. Akihito was a little confused. The girl sensed his confusion. He was probably expecting to see a popular manga, but now he realized that the manga was about manga artists. Without revealing the plot in detail, Charlotte announced that the content would remain a secret. But in short, it was about two guys trying to draw manga. Suddenly, Akihito began to show curiosity about the choice of a particular manga. Suddenly closing the comic book, Charlotte slyly said, "It's a secret." Akihito froze, stunned by what was happening. He silently called the girl a mischievous girl, trying to look unperturbed. Laughing, Charlotte promised to reveal the secret later, but only after he finished reading. It was uncomfortable to read while sitting, and the girl had to hand the book to Akihito personally. Suddenly, she took his sister from his lap. Then Charlotte put Emma to bed and covered her with a blanket. Returning, she settled comfortably between his legs and asked him to continue reading. A pleasant scent emanated from the girl's body. Both of them were overcome with a feeling of intense embarrassment. Putting his lips to her ear, Akihito whispered, "Let's read." The girl instantly jumped back, covering her ear with her hand. Explaining her reaction, she hastily informed him that her hearing was very sensitive. Trying to justify herself, the girl asked him not to breathe on her ears. Charlotte cried out an apology. Akihito raised his hands and began to say, "It's nothing." He felt he needed to be more careful. She reassured him that everything was fine. The second attempt allowed them to get into a comfortable position and start reading. Reading attentively, the girl admired the sincerity of the characters. The guy became curious whether she dreamed of such love. He analyzed the situation briefly. Charlotte needed a popular guy like Akira, but she was with him every day, and now she was in his arms. A living angel appeared before him. Akira's eyes were fixed on her, but if the relationship deepened, lost in thought, he missed Charlotte calling him a dozen times in a row. Waving her hand in front of his face, she asked if he could hear her. She was worried about his condition. His face took on a serious expression. He asked what had happened. He apologized, explaining that he had simply been lost in thought. Charlotte touched his forehead, then her own. He was indignant. After all, he didn't feel the heat. But Charlotte said his forehead had become warmer. Akihito was annoyed by her inappropriate conclusions. She removed her hand. Then she leaned her forehead against his. Blushing, the girl explained that he definitely had a fever and dark circles had appeared under his eyes. It was decided to stop reading for the day. She asked where the mattress was. He pointed to the closet in the bedroom. Charlotte immediately went there. Entering the bedroom, she laid him down to rest. Akihito resisted, saying it was too early. Charlotte warned that it was recommended to go to bed at the first signs of illness. And he already had a high temperature, so refusal was not an option. She insisted that he not worry, as she intended to stay with him until he fell asleep. He thought to himself that now he definitely wouldn't be able to sleep. The girl was firmly convinced that his insomnia was caused by contact with them. She ordered him to stop worrying and go to bed quickly. He resisted. She emphasized that the heat was getting worse. He needed to go to bed immediately. She gently wished him good night. She turned off the light and remained sitting next to him. He was surprised that she really stayed. Although he was pleased, she felt she had done something ridiculous. She usually did this with her sister. She even suggested reading manga together. I wonder how he took that suggestion. Leaning forward, she tried to figure out if he was awake or already asleep. She paid attention to the smallest features of his face. He had beautiful long eyelashes, like a girl's. With a little styling, he could be a celebrity. However, at school, he prefers to act like a bully. What associations does this phrase evoke? What kind of manga would he prefer? She addressed this question to Miyu. At first, she didn't understand the point of the question. Why did she need such details? Miyu advised her to talk to Akira, since they had been friends since childhood. However, the teacher was tormented by curiosity. Why not ask a direct question? Charlotte wanted to tell the truth, but she couldn't. According to their agreement, no one should know about their relationship. The only thing she knew was that he was a soccer player. Then the teacher asked her to think about it. She suggested choosing a realistic story. Charlotte didn't understand the meaning. Miyu explained the idea in detail. It would be wonderful if the hero of the novel received a well-deserved reward for his efforts. However, it would be better to avoid plots about family well-being. Otherwise, it would have the opposite effect. The girl became interested in the proposed option. Miyu categorically refused to continue her explanations, limiting herself to the conclusion that she had given all the advice she could. Charlotte did not give up. What exactly was she trying to hide? What burden was the young man carrying on his shoulders? The teacher remained adamant. The message about the impossibility of disclosing information was spoken in a loud enough voice. The other teachers asked her to be quieter. Calm down. Miyu said that if it was important for her to know, she should ask a direct question. Charlotte asked if she could at least give her a hint. The teacher cheerfully rejected the request and exclaimed, "No." Charlotte was offended. Seeing this, the teacher warned her not to be offended. After all, Akihito was preoccupied with his own concerns. But if she could influence his beliefs, Charlotte interrupted her. She realized the difficulty of the task. The teacher noticed her student's passion. She read her like an open book. Everything was clear from her face. She liked this boy. That's how Miyu reasoned. This remark put the girl in an awkward position. Miyu finally embarrassed her by voicing her observations aloud. Charlotte vehemently denied her interlocutor's correctness. She justified herself by saying that her words had been misinterpreted. Nevertheless, he plays with her little sister every day. A very touching character trait. Miyu was surprised. She asked if this really happened regularly. It turned out that they visited each other every day. These two turned out to be smart. The girl was already lying at her feet, trying to explain the situation. The teacher remained calm. She understood everything that was happening and advised her to continue in the same vein. She said it directly. Miyu was glad that the kids had become friends. Charlotte was wary. She asked with some dissatisfaction, "Because now you have a chance to tease him?" Miyu seriously supported the conversation. Akihito thinks like an adult and has good reasons. It would be great if she could support him. The main question was how she could do that. Miyu simply replied, "Don't overcomplicate it, just be kind to him." Charlotte listened carefully to the advice. She was convinced that he was a wonderful person and that they could become close. Miyu noticed the girl's bright blush again. She started to get nervous again. Miyu stepped aside, happy to see her students getting closer. Charlotte told her to stop. The teacher noticed that lunch was coming to an end and sent her to class. Remembering the moment when she was sitting next to her, Charlotte asked aloud, what heavy burden was he carrying? Akihito turned on his side and glanced at his watch. 6:28 a.m. At 6:30, he turned off the alarm and buried his face in the pillow. Charlotte's voice made him lift his head. She was checking to see how he was feeling. She moved closer. Then stepping back, she concluded that his temperature had dropped. However, she insisted on taking his temperature. To avoid worrying him, the guy cautiously asked if she had spent the whole night with him. She happily said that it wasn't hard for her to take care of him, which put his mind at ease. Akihito apologized. Charlotte reminded him that when difficulties arise, one should seek support. Then he changed the subject. Yesterday's fever was not caused by a cold. The girl said incredulously, "What?" The cause of the fever was severe embarrassment, but she misinterpreted the symptoms. Charlotte expressed doubt. Could a hot forehead be a sign of some other illness? The conclusion was obvious. Was it all because of her touch? At first, she hung her head sadly. Then her mood changed. Accepting the fact, she suggested that it was sitting together that had caused the temperature to rise, and the method she had chosen to check her health. Akihito apologized again for the trouble caused by his lack of actual illness. The girl waved her hand dismissively. The fact was that she herself was to blame for her excessive tension, so she should just forget about the incident. Emma ran in happily and exclaimed enthusiastically, "Oni-chan." Her sister asked when Emma had woken up. The girl shared that she had just gotten up. Emma wanted to know if he was going to live with them. He replied with a counter question. Where did she get that idea? The answer was simple. Because he was lying on the bed in their house. Akihito corrected her. It was his own bed. Then the girl sighed with relief. So they were at his house. Now Emma felt sad, fearing that she would have to leave her Oni-chan's home. Akihito assured her that she would stay with him. But Emma stubbornly insisted that she wanted to move in with him permanently. Charlotte was offended and indignantly asked if that meant she was now rejecting her sister. Emma feigned displeasure, which Akihito noticed. To him, she looked like a child. The girl ran up to her sister and argued passionately that she needed her sister and that they would live with Oni-chan. Charlotte tried to clarify the situation by pointing out the incorrectness of both sides' behavior. Emma muttered something indistinct. Akihito smiled when he saw how similar the sisters' behavior was. Sometime later, Akihito thanked Charlotte for breakfast. The girl took it as a compliment, but he honestly admitted that he was ready to eat Charlotte's food every morning. This reaction made her feel shy. She turned away, embarrassed. Emma intervened, adding that being around Oni-chan made her want to eat more, and she wanted to eat with him every day. Charlotte responded with, "What is she talking about?" She claims that she buys quality products. The girl almost cried when she realized that she had disrupted the order of things. Charlotte was upset by her sister's behavior. Akihito smiled and tried to calm her down. He said that he understood the situation perfectly. Charlotte reacted negatively to this opinion. She felt that he was making fun of her, coming up with negative comments in his head. Instead of being grateful, Charlotte behaved emotionally. Akihito continued to calm her down. Nothing like that was happening. She frowned haughtily again and repeated her complaint after her sister. A question arose within him. Could this childish game be a result of her trust in him? After finishing washing the dishes, Charlotte warned about the upcoming tests. These would begin after the summer holidays. Wanting to know if they were exempt from participating, he turned to Charlotte. In response, he received confirmation. This time, he would not have to write the test. Talking about the school's achievements, Charlotte informed him that he had been recognized as the best student in the school. She needed to brush up on her knowledge and strive to improve her academic performance. Akihito looked at her silently. After some internal analysis, he concluded that she was very talented and fluent in Japanese. She was capable of competing well in the rankings. After openly declaring his intention to maintain his leading position, he continued to ponder. Considering the time allocated to the sports festival, he thought about his priorities. The girl did not understand what he was talking about. Akihito asked again if she understood the point. Frightened by her own misunderstanding, Charlotte gestured vigorously, showing her denial. According to her, sports events take up less time in the English education system. The morning ended like that. Emma suggested a game to Oni-chan. They played until it was time to get ready for school. Emma insisted on accompanying Oni-chan. Her sister gently reminded her that they were not going to visit anyone that day. The girl capriciously insisted on the opposite. Charlotte patiently persuaded her to give up the trip. Judging by the dark circles under his eyes, she decided it was necessary to let him rest for at least a day. To distract the child, the sister showed her videos of cats. The effect was weak. Emma rejected all suggestions, including going out for sweets and a game of dominoes. Emma called her a troublemaker and moved towards the door. Charlotte caught her sister in time. It was difficult for her to tolerate such behavior. The girl began to struggle and scream. Unable to take it anymore, she turned her sister around, took her by the shoulders, and said loudly that she would not allow it and asked her to stop immediately. Emma burst into tears. A tantrum began with loud screams. Charlotte realized the scale of the problem. She tried to calm her sister down, but it was too late. The girl pulled away, shouting that she hated her. Charlotte tried to hold her back, but to no avail. Charlotte yelled for her to stop, warning her that there was a staircase ahead. Emma, of course, didn't listen. Charlotte continued to scream, begging God to stop time. Emma began to lose her balance. Charlotte prayed desperately that nothing would happen to her sister. Charlotte was overcome with panic, watching her sister tumble down the stairs. At the last moment, Akihito flew over and managed to save the girl. Charlotte thanked him warmly. Charlotte lamented that they were nothing but trouble. Akihito did not share her point of view. None of them caused him any trouble. On the contrary, he was always happy to see them. Impressed by what had happened, Charlotte asked again. Akihito confirmed that with the girl's arrival, his life had become much more interesting. The girl tried to object, but he continued. Charlotte herself had recently said that in difficult situations, people need to support each other. Akihito agreed with her. He was proud to be able to help. After all, if someone relies on you, it means they see you as a trustworthy person. Charlotte clapped her hands, calling him a saint. Akihito felt the need to understand the reasons behind what had happened. Emma accused her sister of cruelty. She allegedly forbade her from spending time with Oni-chan. Akihito remained indifferent to the accusations, realizing Charlotte's complete innocence. She was just worried about his well-being. Charlotte sat quietly on the sidelines. Unexpectedly, Akihito took responsibility for himself. Emma was stunned and hastily asked a question. He explained in detail. Earlier, he had warned Charlotte that he was busy today, so she forbade her sister from going out with him. Charlotte tried to get his attention. Through her tears, the girl asked if he hated her. Quite the opposite. He loved her. Realizing this, Emma solemnly announced that she would now live with him. Both asked at the same time what. Akihito tried to gently explain to the girl that moving was not possible. Tears welled up in Emma's eyes. Akihito lost his train of thought. He didn't know what to do. Trying to figure out the reason, he heard the girl cry out that she didn't want to go back to Charlotte. Then Akihito had to repeat his explanation. He admitted that he was partly to blame. While playing games, he had not paid attention to Charlotte's plans. Sitting and twiddling her fingers, Emma explained that Charlotte was bad and Oni-chan was kind. Charlotte entered the room. She apologized to her sister. Despite her rudeness, she didn't mean to scare her. The girl hid behind Oni-chan's back. Charlotte turned to him. He concentrated, waiting for her explanation. Charlotte decided that the best solution was to ask Akihito to spend time with Emma. Akihito clarified the details. Charlotte soberly assessed her abilities. Clearly, she would not be able to take her sister home. After the morning's shouting, the best solution seemed to be to give Emma freedom of action. Akihito wanted to resolve the conflict. He thought Charlotte was exaggerating the problem. Emma would soon return to normal, and there was no cause for concern. Charlotte insisted that leaving her here was the right decision. If that was what the girl wanted, then her wishes should be respected. In return, she promised to throw a grand food party. Akihito noticed Charlotte's enthusiasm. Now it was harder for him to refuse. Charlotte thanked him. The girl had a new problem. It concerned taking a bath. Surprised, Akihito asked her to repeat herself. Imagining the scenario, he pictured Emma taking a bath while Charlotte stood nearby, wrapped in a towel. Fortunately, Charlotte took a sensible view of the situation. She decided to take her sister home herself. Emma was adamant. Charlotte offered a compromise. After her bath, she would bring the girl to her brother. Emma took a combative stance. She refused categorically. Distrust prevented her from agreeing. The girl remembered her sister's recent outburst. Charlotte tried to remedy the situation. She assured her that she was no longer angry. In response, she was accused of lying. Then she suggested taking a bath at Akihito's. He would go for a walk in the meantime. The boy was literally in a stupor. No one was interested in his opinion. Akihito begged her to reconsider her decision. The girl apologized, but warned that otherwise Emma would drag them both into the bathroom with her. The girl was made a new offer. Did she want Akihito to go with them? Emma reacted negatively. Then she looked at Akihito. The guy delicately pointed out that the presence of a man during washing was unacceptable. Otherwise, he could not guarantee his own safety. Charlotte confidently stated that he was completely reliable and trustworthy. Akihito dramatically covered his eyes with his hand. Embarrassed, Charlotte urged him not to look at their personal belongings. Akihito had no such intention. Charlotte expressed her gratitude. Finally, Emma called everyone to take a bath. Already in the bathroom, Emma cried out when she felt a stinging sensation in her eyes. Charlotte told her to close them and began rinsing them with water. All this time, Akihito sat behind the closed door and listened. He looked at the bag next to him, which contained women's panties and a bra. Then he looked away, embarrassed. Emma whined plaintively, claiming that her sister was teasing her again. Akihito smiled and told her to just close her eyes and rinse it well. Then she asked why he didn't come in with them. Akihito froze, not knowing what to say. Charlotte protested sharply, categorically forbidding him to enter. Emma couldn't understand the reason for the ban. Her sister impatiently asked why. The answer came immediately. They were standing naked. But is it normal to bathe with your clothes on? Emma reasoned logically. Charlotte raised her voice, explaining that it wasn't about the clothes. It's just that boys and girls don't bathe together. Emma calmly asked, so what? Her sister had no choice but to call her strange. Akihito apologized to the girl. Emma still didn't understand what the problem was. Akihito explained that boys and girls could only go into the bathroom together after they were married. Emma then reasonably asked why he didn't marry her. Akihito evasively replied that it was impossible. The girl decided that he simply did not love her. Akihito tried to calm her down. Of course, he loved her, but child marriages were not allowed. Emma suggested postponing the wedding until she was older. Akihito laughed and supported the idea. However, if she agreed when she grew up, Charlotte angrily cut him off. She sternly ordered him to keep his mouth shut and not to speak carelessly. After all, such conversations were unacceptable. Akihito figured out the reason for her irritation. According to her, this is a technique used by authors of romantic comedies in manga. The main character rashly promises his bride to marry her from an early age. Later, when they meet again, it turns out that he's already in a relationship with another woman, and a difficult choice arises. Akihito wondered why this should cause concern. It's just fiction, and it's unlikely that a child would remember something like that. In response, he heard Charlotte's indignant exclamation. Girls have excellent memories from an early age and are able to remember minor events on a daily basis. Charlotte and Emma were alone in the bathroom. Emma didn't understand the essence of the conversation, but she was annoyed with her sister. Charlotte tried to explain to her that this was not teasing, but an important conversation. Outraged, Emma firmly stated that she would go to Oni-chan and got out of the bathtub. Throwing open the door, the completely naked girl slipped out and headed for Akihito. Charlotte didn't have time to catch her and bring her back. Akihito sat motionless, tense. Emma settled comfortably in his arms, completely naked. Charlotte followed her, completely naked. She was incredibly embarrassed. The guy glanced quickly in her direction and froze in deep shock. Covering her chest tightly and closing her eyes, Charlotte rushed after the girl. Afterwards, she felt deeply humiliated. Apologizing for being seen like that, she was afraid that the guy would think badly of her. Akihito asked her not to worry about it so much. He took all the blame upon himself. After all, he hadn't even thought to turn away. However, according to Charlotte, he was worried about them. She thanked him for that. In general, the guy tried to put the incident out of his mind. Repeating her request, the girl announced that she was leaving. She asked her sister if she was going to come home. A gesture meaning no came in response. Or, more precisely, she just pressed her head against her brother's shoulder. Standing in the doorway of the apartment, Charlotte apologized for leaving the girl with him. He convinced her not to worry. In that case, the girl said goodbye and thanked him again. As she left, Akihito wished her good night. Charlotte smiled and closed the door. After making sure she was gone, Akihito noticed that Emma looked sad. He suggested they watch some cat videos to cheer her up. After a while, he approached her and gently reminded her that it was time to get ready for bed. Emma sat on the floor, looking at funny animals on her phone screen. Akihito gently reached out his arms to pick her up. The girl obediently complied. He put her to bed. He took her phone away and reminded her that it was time to turn off the device. After putting his phone on charge, he lay down next to her. Suddenly, Emma snuggled up to him. Akihito asked what was wrong. Emma said excitedly that Charlotte no longer had warm feelings for her. Akihito reassured her that this was not the case. The girl clarified, confirming his assumption. He confidently assured her that Charlotte loved her very much. Emma spoke again. She remembered how her sister had cried. Akihito advised her not to dramatize the situation. Charlotte would not stop loving her because of some minor incident. Emma countered with a counterargument. After all, her sister had scolded her. Despite their differences, Akihito remained firm in his opinion. Charlotte definitely loved her. He asked if she thought he would deceive her. Emma believed every word. It was nice to hear such confessions from her. At the same time, Akihito talked about the girl's inappropriate behavior. He strongly recommended that she apologize the next day. Emma shouted, "No way." He tried to find out the reason for her refusal. Lying with her back to him, she remembered how much yesterday's event had hurt her. Akihito insisted that this was precisely why she should apologize. Emma was afraid to admit her mistake. He didn't know how to convince her, but he felt there was no other way. Emma curled up under the blanket and continued to doubt. Thinking hard, the boy found a suitable object, a domino tile. He was surprised. Where did it come from? Looking at the number 1 on the tile, Akihito showed it to the girl and suggested that she apologize in this way. Emma eagerly agreed. Akihito happily asked if she could handle the task. After receiving a positive response, he promised to buy the necessary supplies. All that remained was to prepare in advance. Emma confirmed that she would do her best. It was time to go to sleep, but the girl objected that she wanted to talk some more. However, she soon fell asleep without noticing. As soon as the girl fell asleep, Akihito hurried to the kitchen. He sat down at the table. He made a detailed plan. First of all, he chose the venue for the party, the bedroom. Next, he had to decide on the color scheme and draw up plans for the decorations. The next morning, Charlotte ordered them to go into the apartment. She apologized for leaving her sister with him, but Akihito just waved it off. He had suggested it himself. Walking a little ahead, Charlotte did not see her sister and asked where Emma was. Akihito replied that she was playing in the bedroom. Charlotte sat down and began looking in the closet, asking questions nonstop. She was worried that the girl had done something again. Akihito happily replied that she was as cute as ever. Charlotte wanted her sister to always stay that way. She was afraid that Emma would not forgive her. The girl fell silent for a moment. Noticing this, the boy tried to calm her down, but all he got in response was discontent. She asked if he was just trying to defuse the situation. What had happened had greatly upset her, and she did not believe her sister would forgive her. Charlotte began to cry, saying through her tears that Emma hated her after all. Akihito panicked. It hurt him to see the girl's tears. Suddenly, Charlotte asked if Emma was angry. Smiling, he advised her not to worry, but to just sit down and talk directly. Akihito had already grabbed the doorknob, ready to go in. But looking at the door handle, Akihito wondered, did their parents know that Emma was with him? And did they even live together? Noticing his tension, the girl asked what he was thinking about. He didn't dare ask the questions that were bothering him and asked something completely different. What if Emma is asleep? Charlotte thought about it. Emma could be. She was always following him around. Turning around, Charlotte felt tears welling up in her eyes again. Akihito hurried into the room, seeing how she was getting more and more worked up. Charlotte followed him. Stopping at the door, she expected them to go into the living room, but Akihito wanted to talk right there. She felt uncomfortable. Was the conversation going to take place in bed? Akihito noticed her reaction and called her name questioningly. Charlotte began to explain her thoughts incoherently. It was not surprising, since he was a guy, and such ideas could pop into his head. She had no intention of exposing herself to him. It was just a misunderstanding caused by her confusion. Besides, they weren't even in a relationship, and Emma was in the room. Akihito remained calm. With a smile on his face, he said he just wanted to talk. Charlotte was so embarrassed that she covered her mouth with her hand, unable to believe she had said her thoughts out loud. The guy partially understood her reasoning and convinced her that she was worrying about the wrong thing. In a panic, Charlotte begged him to forget what she had said. Akihito laughed and pretended not to understand what she was talking about, although deep down he was shocked. Finally, he opened the door. Emma was waiting for them at the door. The girl looked as if she was about to cry. She was literally burning her sister with her gaze. Charlotte noticed the dominoes scattered on the floor and asked why they were there. Akihito confidently commanded, "Start." Emma pushed the first domino with lightning speed. They began to fall one after another. And in a couple of seconds, a picture formed with the words, "I'm sorry." Charlotte was shocked. Looking at the inscription, she asked who had done it. Akihito explained that it was his idea, but Emma had arranged everything. At that moment, the girl was hiding behind his back. Akihito emphasized that Emma had arranged every detail herself. Picking up one knuckle, Charlotte remembered that her sister had never liked arranging them. Akihito confirmed that despite her dislike of the task, Emma had done it anyway, and it was clear why. Charlotte's heart ached with pain. She felt like a bad sister. Akihito was worried. Why did she think that? Holding the dominoes in her hands, she admitted her mistake. She hadn't thought about her sister's feelings, worrying only that they would bother Akihito. She even yelled at her, scaring her, and in the end, Emma apologized first. "That's not right," she whispered. Looking at her sparkling eyes, he replied, "That's not true." Charlotte asked again, and Akihito began to explain. He hadn't heard her shouting at all. In his opinion, the girl had managed to instill responsibility in the little girl, and she herself realized it. At that moment, the girl ran up to him to hug him. He picked her up. To be sure, he asked her, "Isn't that right?" Emma confirmed it. In addition to the boy's suggestions, she was well aware of her feelings. That was why she had decided to apologize. Looking down at the floor and shrinking, Charlotte hesitated. To further convince her, Akihito told her how many times she had failed, how persistently she had continued to try for her sake, if she still thought it shouldn't be that way. In order to avoid continuing this awkward pause between the sisters, Akihito suggested they apologize to each other. He believed this was the best option for both of them. Charlotte gently reached out and touched her sister's soft hair. This made Emma cling to the young man even more. Charlotte begged her to forgive her. She vowed to think more about her from now on. Charlotte really hoped for forgiveness. Emma was stunned by her sister's sincerity. Charlotte reached out to take the girl. Emma quickly jumped into her sister's arms. Clinging to her, Emma began to cry. She apologized for her terrible behavior. Holding hands, the girls were happy. Akihito was also happy to see that they had made up. They thanked each other together. However, he didn't think so. He hadn't done anything special. They had done everything themselves. Charlotte disagreed. Without him, nothing would have worked out either. And the domino idea was cool too. Akihito pointed at the girl and justified himself. Emma did it all, not him. Sitting on the floor, Charlotte was touched. She praised her Onii-chan. The guy thought she was going too far. Charlotte stood her ground. He was wonderful and reliable. She was happy with this turn of events. Akihito said that if necessary, they should turn to him. He would be happy to help. Charlotte stared at him silently. When he called her, she felt embarrassed. Akihito happily repeated the same thing. Tucking her hair behind her ear, Charlotte once again noted his reliability. Emma ran back to the young man and began to hug him. Charlotte had already resigned herself to it and noted with dissatisfaction that he was a natural heartbreaker. The girl shouted irritably, "Charlotte is flying somewhere in the clouds." Akihito told her not to talk like that. Charlotte changed the subject. After all, she hadn't even thanked him, as she thought she should have. Akihito objected. He was helping from the bottom of his heart, not for profit. Charlotte wouldn't let up. It bothered her that he had done so much for them, and she hadn't. Her desire to repay him began to frighten Akihito. Charlotte didn't understand him. Was he really so against it? Akihito gave up and agreed, as arguing was pointless. Charlotte clapped her hands with joy. Out of nowhere, she put her hand on his back. She quickly kissed him on the cheek. Then she stepped back. Akihito was shocked and asked her what she was doing. She replied shyly that she did it as a sign of gratitude and hoped that they would continue to be such close friends. Even after that, she thought it wasn't enough. Akihito insisted that he was pleased. Charlotte jumped up and, her face red, tried to leave the apartment as quickly as possible. Emma also said she wanted to kiss him goodbye. She grabbed her sister, and in a second they were standing at the door. Emma screamed that she was mean. Charlotte explained that her sister was still young and only she was allowed to do that. Akihito ran after them. Emma called out to her Onii-chan. The girls got ahead of him. They left the apartment faster than he did. Touching his cheek, the boy blushed. In his opinion, Charlotte had acted unfairly. The next day, there were many different dishes on the table. Emma sat next to Onii-chan and didn't leave his side for a second. She asked him affectionately to feed her. While she was stuffing her cheeks with food, Akihito asked her if she liked it. Then Emma ordered him to let her try another dish. Akihito obediently fulfilled her whims, keeping a focused expression on his face. Charlotte laughed as she watched them. Emma relied on him so much. They both laughed. The child still seemed very cute to the young man, and Charlotte agreed with him. After an awkward pause, Akihito asked about the girls' trip to the garden tomorrow. The girls simply nodded in surprise. While the adults were talking, the little girl quietly fell asleep in the young man's arms. When Akihito gently laid her on the bed, Charlotte added that it was a special kindergarten for foreigners. Akihito listened silently and suggested throwing a party in Charlotte's honor. He chose an approximate date, the day after tomorrow, when the test would be over. Charlotte hesitated. Akihito tried to find out why. It turned out that the whole problem was with the girl. In her home country, She had a hard time going to regular kindergarten, and according to Charlotte, it was unlikely to be any better here. Emma was a difficult child, so it won't be possible to leave her for long. Akihito clarified. Charlotte, who was busy with other things, confirmed his guess. She didn't want her little sister to worry unnecessarily. Akihito concluded that it all depended on the girl herself. Charlotte added that if she got used to it, she would be happy to go. To prevent the girl from being pressured about this at school, Akihito promised to talk to Akira. Charlotte thanked him again. After finishing her chores at home, she picked up her sister and left the boy's house. After seeing the guests off, he found some appetizing onigiri on the table. Akihito became curious. Were they for him? Coming closer, he saw a note. In it, the girl thanked him for everything and advised him not to overwork himself. Akihito happily began to eat. The day flew by unnoticed. The next day, Emma happily posed for her older brother to evaluate her outfit for kindergarten. He was touched by her outfit. Emma demanded to be picked up, and he immediately complied. The little girl laughed happily. Meanwhile, Charlotte, standing at the door with a bag, said cheerfully, "She told you so." She couldn't resist joking that they looked like father and daughter. Akihito and Emma looked at her in confusion. Charlotte felt awkward, laughed, and tried to explain. It was just impossible to look at them without smiling. Emma didn't get the joke and asked directly, "So, Oni-chan is her dad?" The guy smiled, thinking to himself, she's the same. He apologized and said no. Emma pretended to be offended. Noticing this, Akihito told her not to be offended. Charlotte smiled broadly, noticing how well he got along with the child. Akihito didn't think much of it. He was more concerned about the girl's willingness to go to kindergarten. While they were talking, Emma whined for food. Charlotte told her not to be silly and quickly ran to the kitchen. Akihito patted her on the head and praised the girl for her patience. Charlotte quickly prepared the meal. Both Akihito and Emma were delighted. The girl ended up lying on the floor, full, while Akihito rested on a chair. It seemed to him that even eternity would not be enough to thank Charlotte. She became alarmed and, holding her hands out in front of her, began to justify herself, saying that they came to him themselves. Akihito remained silent. Sitting at the table, he suddenly remembered their kiss. He felt awkward. He noticed that after that incident, they were spending more and more time alone together. Not wanting to dwell on it, he turned his attention to Emma. She had already fallen asleep on the carpet. Akihito apologized because Charlotte would now have to wake her up again. As she cleared the table, she replied that everything was fine and there was nothing to worry about. Nevertheless, he was going to wake her up, but Charlotte warned him that Emma was always unhappy, no matter who woke her up. He didn't think much of it. He gently poked the girl's soft cheek with his finger. He said affectionately, "Emma, it's morning, time to get up." Emma didn't answer, but simply grabbed the boy's finger. Akihito pulled his finger up, and the girl's hand stretched out with his. Akihito was shocked at how strong she was. Then Akihito picked up the phone. A strange sound came from the phone. It caught Charlotte's attention. She guessed it was a cat, but asked anyway. Akihito didn't understand what she was talking about. To make it clearer, Charlotte pointed to the meowing coming from his phone. He confirmed it. However, he had turned the sound down to a minimum. She brought the phone closer to him, showing him the sound and image of the cat. Emma woke up instantly. Upon waking up, she said, "Kitty." He asked if she was awake. The child did not answer, but turned her attention to the cat. She was happy about this. Emma asked where the cat was. Pointing to the phone, he said it was right there. He gave her the phone, and Emma looked happily at the screen. Charlotte was beside herself with happiness. How easily he had woken her up. She made a mental note of this method. He warned her that the girl was unlikely to fall for it again. Charlotte was saddened. Akihito reminded her that it was time to go. The girl forgot where she was supposed to go. When she asked him, he said it was time for her to go to kindergarten. Pointing her fist at him, she asked if he would go too. Apologizing, he refused. Emma pretended to be offended again. Sitting down, Charlotte told her she would go with her. Emma didn't want to give in. Taking the bag that was standing next to the table, the girl said goodbye. When they left, the boy had time to study. He happily took out his notebook, hoping that Emma would like it. At school, Akira noticed how his friend had blossomed lately. Akihito asked again, not quite understanding what he was talking about. Sitting in the school cafeteria and getting ready to start his long-awaited lunch, he heard from his friend that it was obvious from his face that his life had improved. Akihito thought for a moment and asked how noticeable it was. Akira, slumped in his chair, replied that he looked the same as he did in middle school. Akihito's mood changed dramatically. From a happy guy, he turned into a sad one. Akira asked anxiously if he had received any bad news from home. Noticing the sadness and fear in his friend's eyes, Akira realized that something else was wrong. Akihito tried not to dwell on it, adding that nothing was likely to change. Taking advantage of the opportunity, Akira suggested that he return to soccer, so that everything would be as it was before, Akira and Akihito on the field. Akihito abruptly asked him not to bring up the subject. He claimed that he no longer had the right to play. Akira spread his arms indignantly. In his opinion, only Akihito himself believed that. The young man remembered the reaction of his teammates in the past. Because of him, they had lost the opportunity to win, and therefore he could not allow himself to return. Akira tried to change his mind, starting with a phrase about his friend's innocence. But Akihito interrupted him, taking all the blame upon himself. When Akira called out to him again, Akihito was already completely lost in his thoughts. He decided to change the subject. Akihito asked about Akira's progress in preparing for the tests. Taken aback, Akira choked on his cola. Hesitating, the young man barely managed to say that it was cruel to treat him that way. Akihito reminded him that the tests were tomorrow. Akira gave him a thumbs up, hoping to get at least a passing grade. To help his friend, Akihito promised to give him a summary with the key points. At least he could learn that. Akira, overcome with gratitude, threw his arms around him. He threw his arms around him. Akira was genuinely happy about their friendship, but Akihito jokingly asked him not to show such feelings in front of girls. Akira understood everything and added that now it was clear why girls avoided him. Akihito, on the other hand, believed that the reason was his excessive persistence. Akira became doubly sad. Charlotte still refused to go out with him. Akihito laughingly reminded his friend of an important reason, caring for his sister. But Akira didn't listen. He was sure that the girl already had a boyfriend. Akihito was surprised. Why did he come to that conclusion? Akira pointed to the changes in Charlotte's behavior. When she transferred to this school, she was completely different. Akihito didn't see the connection because only 2 weeks had passed, and it was unlikely that anything could have changed in such a short time. Leaning on his arm, Akira continued to argue the opposite. He said it was written all over her face, that she liked someone. At that moment, Akihito angrily put his glass down on the table. He suddenly blushed and, scratching his cheek, asked his friend again. As if afraid to hear the answer, he quickly stood up. He went to return the tray with empty dishes, finally saying that these speculations would lead nowhere. Scratching his head awkwardly, his friend agreed. Later, on the way to the office, Akihito suggested throwing a party for Charlotte after the exams. Akira, who had completely forgotten about it, was delighted. Akihito asked if he could organize everything, adding that the guys would surely be in favor of it. Akira happily confirmed this, mentioning that he had just finished training. As they stood on the stairs, Akihito insisted on asking Charlotte first and asked not to pressure her. A sign of understanding, Akira gave a thumbs up, promising to ask delicately. Akihito smiled gently and thanked him. Akira didn't understand why, but his friend just advised him to forget it. As they parted, Akihito wished him luck, and, literally fluttering with happiness, he went to his office, where, as Akira noticed, it was already quite noisy. Despite this, Akihito was the first to open the door. What were they doing in there? This question arose in Akira's mind. Akihito urged him to hurry. Upon entering the classroom, someone shouted, "Why are they panicking?" One of the boys yelled at another that he would invite him too. The other asked angrily, "Who would say that? They come here every day. They've become completely insolent." A fight broke out. Both grabbed each other by the collars of their shirts. Charlotte was worried and begged them to calm down. Tears began to roll down her cheeks, which she immediately wiped away with her hands. The fact that Charlotte was crying finally finished Akihito off. He stepped in to break it up. He stepped between them and pushed them apart gently. Akihito asked angrily what they were doing. Everyone suddenly fell silent. Akihito was like a dog that had broken free from its chain. He repeated his question. Without waiting for any explanation of the situation or why it had started in the first place, the guy began to twist the arms of those involved in the fight. Both of them doubled over in pain and began to scream. One of them asked angrily who he was. The young man ignored him and continued to scold them. Didn't they have anything better to do? Pointing to the girls, he noticed how they had frightened them. One boy with black hair calmed down and explained that they had just gotten a little carried away. The second one chimed in. According to his excuse, they just made a little noise. It was nothing. Akihito also glared at them angrily. He said, "What are they telling him? They even scared Charlotte." Akira ran up to his friend and whispered in his ear to calm down. Akihito looked stunned. Letting them go, he stepped aside and apologized wearily because the break was almost over and it was time for them to go to class. One of the culprits waved his hand and apologized for the disturbance. The boy with black hair opened the door and apologized for scaring the girls so much. The other one, with frightened eyes, apologized separately to Charlotte and quietly walked away toward the exit. Akihito was angry with himself. He was ashamed of what he had done. Finally, they apologized to Akihito, blaming the others, saying that they were the ones who started it all. The guy sighed heavily. It annoyed him that they came to them every day. Spreading his arms, he didn't understand what he had to do with it. He ordered them to apologize to Charlotte and the other girls. In his mind, he decided to go to Miyu and sort this out. Akira looked at his friend with displeasure. The latter began to ask what was wrong. He smiled awkwardly, scratched the back of his head, and said not to worry about it. Akihito thanked his friend for intervening. Akira waved it off. The guy began to ponder. Akihito didn't usually lose his temper. Still, he decided it would be best to remain silent. He turned around and walked away. He did not respond to Akihito's call. While he was calling his friend, Charlotte quietly approached. Hearing her call, he immediately responded. When she asked, "What is it?" the girl hesitated to speak. Gathering her strength, she thanked him and ran back to her place. Akihito stood and watched her go. Was she scared and ran away? That question stuck in his mind. After that incident, Charlotte never looked him in the eye at school again. But in the evening, when she and her sister came to visit, it was the opposite. One evening, they sat close to each other, and Charlotte stared intently at his face. The boy tried not to show that he was anxious. They looked at each other for a few seconds. Akihito asked if they could talk. Frightened, the girl jumped back and asked what was wrong. Watching her behavior, Akihito was even more surprised. Was she afraid of him? Akihito apologized. Charlotte didn't immediately understand what he meant. Then he explained. At school, he had shown her his dark side, and he was genuinely sorry. He felt so heavy at heart that he fell to his knees. Charlotte rushed to him and, gently touching his hair, called out to him. She asked what had just happened to him, and she began to prove that he had misunderstood everything. The girl was not afraid of him at all, and he had no reason to apologize. Akihito asked the same question again. Why did she look away when they talked? Charlotte began to stutter. At first, she wanted to reveal the real reason. But in the end, she turned away and, with red cheeks, said it was a secret. Akihito didn't quite understand what was going on, but decided it was better to drop the subject. To lighten the mood, the young man remarked on how cheerful Emma looked after kindergarten. Charlotte agreed. She herself was surprised at how much her little sister enjoyed it there. Charlotte recounted the girl's impressions in detail. She had met a little girl named Claire. They had clearly become friends. Charlotte was intrigued by what exactly had made Claire win her sister's heart. When she asked, Emma simply replied that the girl was very pretty. Charlotte explained that the child still had a small vocabulary and surely meant something else, although she herself thought Claire was very cute. At first, the young man responded with a short, "I see." But then he added that all children are cute. Folding her hands in front of her, Charlotte expressed her hope that her sister would grow up to be a real beauty. Akihito didn't understand what she meant. Charlotte explained that when she picked up Emma, she clung to Claire and didn't want to let go. Akihito noticed that they had found each other, and he was surprised that everything went smoothly. Charlotte admitted that she had used a reliable trick. She told Emma that Akihito was waiting for her at home. Akihito was amazed and concluded that the girl always needed motivation. Charlotte added that Claire was a little shocked by this. Akihito was not surprised. Children are unlikely to hold a grudge against each other for long. Charlotte suggested that Emma didn't even realize she might have hurt someone's feelings. Akihito reasonably noted that when she grows up, she will learn to understand people. Charlotte blamed herself for allowing such a situation to happen. Akihito confirmed that it was worth being more careful, otherwise things could turn out badly. Noticing that Charlotte didn't quite grasp his point, he explained, "Children don't know much, and that's why they can sometimes be cruel." Charlotte said his name sadly. Realizing he had said too much, Akihito immediately apologized and tried to cheer her up. He said she had nothing to worry about and, jokingly pointing to his biceps, made it clear that he would take care of everything. Charlotte thanked him again. Akihito apologized again for his pessimism, but Charlotte objected. She could see that he was just worried about Emma. She was pleased that he thought so highly of them. Akihito remained silent. The girl, embarrassed, began to apologize, saying she didn't mean anything like that. Putting his hand to his mouth, Akihito nodded understandingly, letting her know that she shouldn't worry. Charlotte expressed her gratitude again. Thanks to him, Emma had found a friend on her first day. Akihito modestly believed that he had done nothing special, but Charlotte was serious. Emma used to be afraid of strangers and would hide. Now Charlotte saw her waving back, albeit uncertainly. Charlotte admitted that their move and meeting him had changed everything. She was very grateful to him. Akihito smiled. He still thought she was exaggerating. This raised the question. If Emma had become more open, why was she only talking about Claire? Akihito thought that the girl had simply grown up, and that was why she had changed. Fiddling with her fingers, the girl said uncertainly, "Maybe." Akihito called Charlotte. At first, he thought he had imagined it. Suddenly, he changed his mind, and Charlotte said indifferently, "Okay." Then he remembered that since Emma liked everything, they could have the promise party. Charlotte asked if he thought it would be appropriate. Akihito convinced her otherwise. He told her to remember how happy her classmates were when she transferred to this school. The doubts in her head disappeared. Now she was worried about her tests. Slumped in his chair, he explained that it would help her relax, especially since there would be no classes. Charlotte was amazed. He had thought of everything. Charlotte praised him, saying how incredible he was. "He thinks like an adult." Akihito looked sad. Did he really look that old? According to her, Charlotte irritably told him not to make fun of her. Akihito denied it, saying that people often told him that. Charlotte argued that at their age, being compared to adults was a huge compliment. She said that people must have told him he looked like an adult. Touching his chin with his hands, he felt old. Charlotte explained that this was not the case. It was not about appearance, but about behavior. Akihito apologized. Now she felt guilty. Charlotte interrupted him. He said it was okay. Charlotte emphasized that it was just the two of them. Akihito asked again. Charlotte turned away from him. She quietly repeated what she had said to herself. She was very embarrassed. Charlotte asked him if he had heard what she said. Akihito admitted that he had only heard the beginning. The girl breathed a sigh of relief. Akihito thought she was losing control. He asked about the party. The girl sat on her knees in hysterics and agreed anxiously because she was counting on him. And if it wasn't too much trouble, could she ask Akira for help? The girl sighed again and said she would pass it on. She became sad. She stood up and reminded them that it was time to go. She apologized for interrupting his studies. Akihito protested. He needed a break from his studies too. He thanked Charlotte with a smile. Blushing, she took her sister and said goodbye. She quickly left the apartment. The next morning, the sun's rays shone brightly through the window. Akihito woke up and stretched, thinking that he wanted to sleep a little longer. He got up and headed to the bathroom. He squeezed toothpaste onto his toothbrush. And at that moment, the doorbell rang. He was surprised that they had arrived so quickly. He quickly put on his shirt. Akihito ran to open the door. Emma was standing on the doorstep in a cute dress. She cheerfully wished him good morning. Akihito was stunned. She had wished him good morning in Japanese. Overjoyed, Akihito asked her in Japanese if she had learned the language. Emma didn't understand what he was talking about. Then he realized that she had just started learning it. The girl flew up to hug him. They stood there for a couple of seconds. He asked why she was alone. Charlotte's silhouette was visible in the doorway. Leaving the apartment, Charlotte stood in the common hallway where the other apartments were located. She wished him good morning. This action surprised the young man. The girl had distanced herself from him so much. Smiling, he wished her good morning. Charlotte got angry and left. Akihito stood there in shock. He couldn't understand why she was acting this way toward him. Emma emphasized that Charlotte was acting strange. Her older sister asked irritably, how else could she be? After calming down a little, she apologized for her behavior. Holding the girl in his arms, he waved her off and invited her inside. At his house, they sat in silence. The young man began to panic. Akihito tried to calm himself down. He was afraid he would behave like Charlotte. The girl nervously raised her head from time to time. Sitting at the kitchen table, they heard two schoolgirls talking. One of them greeted her friend and asked if she was going to the club. The other confirmed and asked again. She replied that she had committee business to attend to. Charlotte turned her head toward the window. Then Charlotte turned to the young man. Both looked at the floor and continued to sit in silence. Charlotte remembered that she needed to make breakfast. Akihito looked at her in surprise and stammered his thanks. She didn't have to wait long. The girl had everything ready. The table was set with 3 dishes. Emma asked her brother to feed her. Sitting furthest away, Charlotte noticed how happy Akihito and Emma were. The memory of the kiss came back to her mind. After that, she felt uncomfortable even looking him in the eye. Neither her sister nor he noticed anything. It was getting worse. Her heart was beating like crazy. She had to turn away. She didn't say anything about the conversation. The only topic they could talk about was Emma. So Charlotte decided to distance herself. But then loneliness would set in, and her desire to see him would not subside. Today they arrived noticeably earlier. She hoped that this would not seem strange to him. Looking at them, Charlotte felt very sad. She also wanted the kind of attention he gives to the little girl. Emma is definitely the cutest little sister, and she is glad that they have become close. But still, she can understand her. Meanwhile, Akihito was telling the girl that she shouldn't just eat meat. She should eat vegetables too. Akihito watched Charlotte too. She looked at him with embarrassment. When Akihito asked her what was wrong, she got scared and asked him what he was talking about. Akihito told her about his suspicions. However, Charlotte said that it seemed to him, why would that be? Emma also noticed that her sister was looking at her resentfully. Waving her arms, she denied everything. The girl stood her ground. Charlotte continued to deny it. Emma shouted that her sister was a liar. Holding her in his arms, he asked why Emma was swearing like that. Then he stroked her head. The young man was tired of the girl's behavior. He said seriously that if something was bothering her, she should tell him. He smiled so that the girl wouldn't be offended. Charlotte turned away from him, blushing, and began to speak her mind. But then she stopped and dismissed it as nonsense. Akihito looked at her to make sure she was sure. He was ready to do everything in his power so that she wouldn't worry. Lowering her head, she thought the same thing. It was hard for her to admit that she missed his attention. Besides, she didn't want him to think she was jealous or mean. Just in case, Akihito warned her that he was always ready to listen. In her eyes, he seemed so kind. Spending days on end with him was such a luxury. It wasn't right to ask for more, but she wanted just a little bit, just a little, so that he would pay attention to her too. Akihito decided to wrap things up and go pack his things. After all, it was time for them to leave too. Emma said outright that she didn't want to. He looked at Charlotte with incomprehension. Lowering her head, she said it was okay and that they would wait for him. Akihito was shocked. They were going in different directions. Charlotte begged him to at least walk with them to the fork in the road. He shouted in bewilderment, "What?" Tucking her hair behind her ear, she blushed slightly and asked him what he wanted. He was indignant. After all, it was a secret weapon against guys, and he didn't want anyone to see him with her. Without hesitation, he said he was afraid of giving rise to rumors. Based on this, she suggested walking through streets where almost no one goes. Akihito was stunned. He felt pressure from Charlotte. Akihito didn't even know if she cared if they were seen together. On the other hand, if you think about it, if there are few people around, why not? Akihito agreed to walk them to a crowded place. Stammering, she expressed her gratitude. Emma asked again. When she received a positive answer, she was very happy. Akihito told the girls that he needed 5 minutes to pack his bag. The girls didn't object. When he came back, Charlotte shouted, "Okay." By this time, Emma had fallen asleep. She silently approached and picked her up. Akihito asked if she was going to wake her up. Charlotte said that this way she would make less noise, so let her sleep until they arrived at the nursery. He asked if she would be angry and offered to carry her himself. Charlotte wasn't sure how she would react. Akihito reassured her that everything would probably be fine. Akihito and the girl walked ahead, while Charlotte followed behind. When they arrived, Charlotte tugged sharply at his sleeve. Akihito froze in fear. It turned out to be much easier than he thought. Charlotte simply asked if he minded. When she heard the answer no, she said happily, "Thank God." After walking a little further, Charlotte suggested taking a different route. Akihito objected because it would take longer. What was more interesting was that Charlotte informed him that she knew this and still wanted to go. The guy had even more questions. What was motivating her? Was there a reason? Without showing that something was wrong, he readily agreed, explaining that new locations could bring new experiences. The girl smiled and thanked him. Akihito said there was no need to thank him. Charlotte was confused. She thought that at this rate, he would spoil her completely. Charlotte apologized. She quickly lost her energy, and she suggested taking a break. She wanted Akihito to leave Emma with her and go to school himself, otherwise they would both be late. But Akihito couldn't leave them. He was worried that something would happen to them. The girl smiled quietly. She continued to object, reminding him that they had tests today, but the young man didn't care. According to him, if he was late, then so be it. Charlotte didn't have any tests, but she still considered the situation important. Akihito apologized again, but repeated that his conscience would not allow him to leave them. He would fail the tests anyway, because he would be thinking about them, and 10 extra minutes would not make a difference. So it was impossible to change his mind. He was determined to go with them. With her head bowed, Charlotte continued to beg him to go to school, but Akihito stood his ground. So that she wouldn't worry, he suggested a more interesting plan. Just talk about something else. The girl asked, "What, for example?" Akihito smiled and admitted that he would like to hear about her favorite manga. Charlotte protested. He doesn't even read it. But Akihito was genuinely curious to learn about her hobby. Blushing, Charlotte froze in shock. Then she began to emotionally clarify something. Akihito asked calmly what exactly she meant. Suddenly, he gasped. Realizing her hint, he waved his arms hysterically, trying to prove that it wasn't like that. Charlotte was upset. When Akihito asked what was wrong, her expression changed abruptly. She smiled and replied that it was nothing. However, she warned him that she could talk about manga for a very long time. When they finally arrived at the kindergarten, the guy asked if she had been seeing her sister off. Charlotte confirmed this and apologized for the long delay. Coming closer, He advised her not to worry and to forget about it. On the way to school, he asked about the girl's reaction. Charlotte happily told him that Emma was upset because she had slept through the whole trip, and she didn't get to walk with him. But when she saw Claire, the little girl immediately calmed down. She even waved to her. Akihito was surprised by her changeability. Charlotte agreed, suggesting that Emma was simply embarrassed by the looks of her peers. Akihito added that her self-esteem had won out. "Don't say that," Charlotte replied. In her opinion, Emma was mature beyond her years and stronger in spirit than many of her peers. Akihito concluded that in that case, there was no need to worry about her future. "I suppose so," Charlotte replied cheerfully. After this conversation, Akihito stared at the road, while Charlotte looked at him with shining eyes. Noticing that he was not looking in her direction, she turned away in hurt. They stopped in an alley near the school. Akihito said that they couldn't go any further. The girl sadly uttered, "Uh-huh." She waved her hand and said goodbye. Akihito nodded in response. Charlotte turned right, and the guy went straight ahead. That evening, in Akihito's apartment, the young man happily fed Emma. Charlotte was angry. All the attention was going to her sister. She accidentally voiced this thought aloud. Akihito asked, "Did I hear that wrong?" Frightened, she waved her hands in front of her and said she hadn't said anything special. She became sad again. She turned away. Akihito assumed that she was just tired. She was acting too strangely. Stammering, Charlotte tried to convince him that she was just lost in thought. He asked if something was bothering her. The girl loudly denied it and told him not to worry about it. He said Emma's name, not understanding. The girl put her spoon down on her plate and turned to her sister and asked her to open her mouth. She shyly held out the spoon with food. Charlotte tucked her hair behind her ear and quietly said her sister's name. When she swallowed the food, Emma asked if she liked it. Charlotte was transformed. Smiling, she stroked her sister's head, thanked her, and said that everything was very tasty. Emma laughed cheerfully in response. The next day, at school, exhausted, Akira collapsed onto the table, saying happily that it was finally over. Sitting next to him, Akihito asked what he meant by over. Not wanting to talk about it, Akira told him not to ask. He glanced at him. Akihito said it was time to do other things. Akira was confused. He asked what other things they could possibly have to do. Akihito reminded him of his promise to organize a party after the tests. Amidst all the commotion, he had forgotten about this promise. Clenching his fist and shouting, "Oh, right," he banged on the table. He yelled to the whole class that the tests were over. That meant it was time to throw a party for Charlotte. Akihito was pleased with his work. Charlotte was surprised. The whole class immediately surrounded Akira. One boy shouted, "Of course." One of the girls said mockingly that he must have forgotten himself. In order not to look stupid, he laughed and wondered how that was possible. One of the girls asked where they would go. Akira was frightened. He realized that such a crowd would not be allowed in without a reservation. Akira stood there, not knowing what to say. The young man turned to his friend and looked at him with puppy dog eyes. Akihito understood his hint and leaned toward his ear to consult with him. Akihito began to say that he had asked Miyu. But before he could finish, the teacher was already standing in front of them. Akira was very frightened. Akihito begged her not to scare them like that anymore. Miyu said, "Oh, come on." She informed them that she needed to talk to them. Akihito clarified, "Is it about the venue?" The teacher confirmed. Miyu ordered Akira to go with her. She grabbed him by the collar of his shirt and dragged him into the office. He hysterically asked where she was taking him. After all, he was a human being, and besides, they got along well. Akihito followed them. Miyu reported that she had reserved coffee at a friend's place. Akihito emphasized how wonderful it was, but apparently she had tried so hard that there had been no news until the very last moment. Miyu denied this. She thought it would be better that way. She had thought everything through from start to finish. Miyu was sure that the guys wouldn't choose the place. Akihito bowed and apologized. Miyu told him not to worry. Akihito asked if she had delayed it to avoid any confusion. He apologized again. Miyu replied that he had nothing to apologize for. Besides, they got a discount as students. Akihito asked again. He began to say, "But for the whole establishment." The young man didn't have time to finish before the teacher interrupted him. She grabbed him by the shoulder and told him not to worry. It would serve as advertising to attract new customers. Winking, Miyu gave him some advice to clear his mind and relax at least sometimes. Akihito bowed again and expressed his deep gratitude. Turning around, Miyu said that sometimes it was useful to encourage students. She said goodbye and hurried to the staff room. Akihito asked if she would go with them. Miyu turned around and reminded the children that she was a teacher and had no reason to get on their nerves. Besides, there were 2 reasons for the party. Besides, she had a lot to do. Miyu, still smiling, told them to manage without her. After saying this, she hurried away. As Miyu left, Akihito was impressed by her. Miyu was so cool and attentive to him. The young man was glad that she was their homeroom teacher. His admiration did not last long. Akira turned and asked him why he needed him. Akihito easily explained to him that Miyu knew that he should be the class speaker. That's why she called him. Akira remained silent. Without wasting any time, Akihito urged his friend to hurry. Akira agreed. When he entered the classroom, the young man slammed his hand on the table. He happily announced that Miyu had reserved a cafe for them, so they could have a good time. One of the boys shouted, "Awesome!" The girl standing next to him praised him. Akihito had long been accustomed to the enormous attention that was directed at Akira. So he turned around and went to help with the preparations. But something changed that day. When the girl praised him, Akira admitted that it wasn't him, but Akihito who had made the arrangements with her. Akihito was unhappy. Akira responded to his aggression by saying that he didn't like it when people praised him undeservedly. The girl praised Akihito. Akira clarified to the others that this was not the case. Akihito began to support his friend. He explained to everyone that the conversation had turned to the party, so he had put in a good word. With that, he finished and noted that it was time to go. Exhaling easily, Akira said, "That's right." He turned to his friend and asked, "What was the plan?" "Just to come all at once." The young man corrected him, saying that if they were on the street, they would only get in the way of passersby. Therefore, it would be better to go in different groups. After listening carefully to his friend, Akira ordered them to split into 5 groups. Everyone obediently followed the order. Akihito approached his friend and advised him to talk to the owners, so it would be better for them to go. Akira agreed. Charlotte did not take her eyes off Akihito for a moment the entire way. She followed him closely so that no one would suspect anything. Charlotte remembered that no one should find out about their relationship, and that upset her. They entered the cafe. The 5 girls and Akihito sat down at a table. Charlotte sat to his right. Akihito felt extremely uncomfortable. Questions arose in his head. How did this happen? Why was he here? One of the girls sitting opposite Akihito noticed his discomfort. Her name was Arisa Shimizu. She asked him why he felt awkward and offered to switch seats with someone. The guy agreed, but Charlotte didn't like it at all. Charlotte said in a raised voice that it was unfair to change anything since they had drawn lots. Besides, it would cause inconvenience to others. They would have to decide again who would sit with them. The other girls were in complete shock. Charlotte got up from the table. Arisa agreed with her. She added that the guys would probably fight over the opportunity to sit next to her. Pressing her palms together, Arisa addressed Akihito directly. She asked him to stay with them, expressing her hope that girl talk would not tire him. He replied that it was fine. Akihito studied the group carefully. Next to Arisa sat a shy girl with dark hair cut in a bob. She sat slumped, her head down. He noted to himself that she would probably be happy to switch places with one of the guys. But Akihito stopped these thoughts in time, reminding himself that he mustn't ruin Charlotte's party with nonsense. While he was thinking, Charlotte looked at him and apologized. Akihito told her not to worry and supported her, confirming that she was right. Charlotte was embarrassed. To her, it sounded like a whim. But Akihito didn't understand why she felt that way. Their conversation was interrupted by the waitress. She apologized and asked if they were ready to order. Everyone began to study the menu. Akira, with a glass in his hand, shouted that Charlotte should say the first word. The girl protested, pointing out that she didn't know how to make toasts. Then Akihito suggested that Akira start so that Charlotte could gather her thoughts. Akira understood and got down to business. Raising his glass, he proclaimed a toast to the end of exams and to Charlotte. The girl thanked him with admiration. In her opinion, he had saved her. Akihito just waved it off. The young man himself had not expected toasts, but still recommended that everyone be prepared. According to his logic, Charlotte would be asked to say something anyway. Charlotte wanted to say something about him, but Arisa interrupted them. She sighed loudly. Akihito asked what was wrong. Arisa waved it off, saying she was just amazed by their closeness. Who would have thought? Akihito protested that they were just classmates, but Arisa didn't believe him, noting that this was only his version of the truth. Meanwhile, Charlotte looked at Akihito with great displeasure. Other girls approached them. One of them started asking Charlotte what she does on weekends and what she likes to eat. The second girl added that she was also very interested. Charlotte was confused, but she thanked everyone for their attention and admitted that she was pleased to meet them. She began to talk about herself, and the girls bombarded her with questions. Only the girl with the black bob continued to sit silently with her head down. Noticing this, Akihito asked her if she wanted to order anything. The girl's name was Karen Shinano. She looked at him with eyes wide with fear, fidgeting with her fingers, and said nothing. Akihito tried to talk to her anyway, seeing how uncomfortable she was. He gently said that everything was fine and there was no need to rush. Karen pointed to the menu and said uncertainly, "This." Akihito looked and clarified, "Orange juice?" "Okay." And he asked the other girls what they wanted to drink. 3 of them stared at him in bewilderment. Akihito was confused and asked what was wrong with them. Arisa demanded an explanation. Akihito didn't understand the question. Then Arisa asked clearly how often he talked so affectionately with someone. Arisa told him not to play dumb. She had seen how sweetly he had talked to Karen. The girl with the bob cut added that she was surprised by such attentiveness. Akihito still didn't understand what was going on. The girls emphasized that the guy usually spoke directly and looked like a smart aleck who would rather send them away. Arisa glared at her friend and jokingly hit her on the head, telling her not to be rude. Arisa gently pointed out that everyone really did have that impression of him. But now he was a sweetheart, and all his words were helpful. Her friend with the bob cut confirmed this. The girl with the bob confidently stated that they would definitely remember him in the future. Another friend mentioned the fight. Akihito quickly calmed the boys down when they were arguing over Charlotte. And now he's found a cafe. Akihito replied that it was just a coincidence and nothing more. The girls were stunned. Well, the guy couldn't keep quiet when the people around him were acting like fools. The girl with the bob cut asked the other one irritably, "What?" The other one, also aggressively, asked, "Are you at it again?" In the end, they kept their emotions to themselves and turned away from each other. Akihito convinced himself that he was the one who had to remember this role. Arisa continued to praise him. She mentioned Charlotte's words that he didn't hurt people on purpose. Charlotte approached them and added that his words should be read between the lines. Arisa asked if this was true. Akihito looked questioningly at those present. Charlotte apologized. Akihito said that everything was fine and she shouldn't worry. Charlotte asked again. He smiled and said, "That's right." One of the girlfriends with long hair looked at them gloomily. Charlotte asked about the agreement. Akihito said that he had simply imposed his wishes on her. She was upset for a split second. She thanked him and apologized. Putting his hands in front of him, Akihito said that he was the one who should be thanked. By that time, Akihito's order had arrived. He asked the waitress to bring another orange juice. The girl smiled and said she would bring it right away. Charlotte was touched by his gesture. For the young man, it was nothing. Karen, hiding behind her bangs, peeked out in surprise. Another girl mentioned her friend's words about how well they got along. Akihito yelled, "What?" Charlotte waved her arms and said that it was just their impression. The girl argued that she hadn't seen them talking at school. Nevertheless, Charlotte's attitude towards him and other boys was different. Charlotte stood frozen. The girl continued. She noted that Charlotte immediately rushed to defend him. All of this was suspicious to her. She asked Charlotte for her opinion. While the girl stammered, trying to say something, Akihito stood aside, not knowing what to do. Akihito tried not to hurt her feelings. But in the end, he aroused the interest of others. And they, like hyenas, would not leave him alone. Akihito stretched. The girls began to discuss the matter actively. Arisa joined them and said that it was normal. The girl with the bob cut didn't understand what her friend was saying. Arisa explained that Charlotte was kind and was protecting others from attacks. Akihito was straightforward, but he was telling the truth. Charlotte understood and was trying to dissuade them from insulting him. Her friends rushed at her with accusations. The girl on the right reminded her that she was the first to start discussing them. The friend on the left confirmed this and asked why Arisa was going back on her words. Arisa said something that shocked everyone. She made a cunning move. Arisa said that she only noticed how well they got along, and everything else was speculation. The friend on the right tried to intervene, but Arisa continued. Charlotte was comfortable with him, and Arisa herself would talk to him because he wasn't as pushy as other guys. Arisa put forward the theory that they were unlikely to make a good couple. At that moment, Akihito was delighted, while Charlotte looked gloomy. Her friend with the bob cut objected. She started talking about the rumors about him during admissions. The whole school was discussing it. Charlotte looked at him blankly. She didn't realize what rumors they were talking about. Akihito knew she was bad at reading the atmosphere, but he didn't know how bad. Charlotte started asking questions. Arisa started laughing. The girl asked mockingly if he would tell her. After all, a year had passed, so what was there to remember? Another friend joined them and agreed with a smirk, saying that the situation with Miyu was not pretty. Arisa shouted angrily, "Azusa!" The girl lowered her head and apologized. Everyone turned around. Arisa, realizing her mistake, hurried to apologize and asked her not to cry. The girl with the bob cut still didn't understand the situation. Arisa cursed irritably and asked what she didn't understand. Based on everything she had heard and seen, Charlotte realized that Akira and Akihito had been at the same school. The girl with the bob cut added that they had made it to the championship. But what was wrong with that? Arisa understood what was going on. In response, she just sighed. With a heavy sigh, Akihito began to explain what had happened to everyone. He recalled that they had asked him about it last year, but the answer was still the same. Akihito had not been at the championship. The girl with the bobbed hair asked again. She knew they were on the same team and that he was there. Arisa intervened. Arisa ordered them to stop because Akihito had already answered. Why clarify it then? The girl smiled and began to speak. But Arisa interrupted her. The girl approached her and began to whisper in her ear. Arisa called her completely stupid. Miyu would definitely not pat her on the head if she continued to aggravate the situation. The girl fell silent, her eyes wide with fear. She almost got down on her knees to apologize for her actions. Akihito waved her off, smiling and saying that everything was fine. Then she thanked him. Akihito, addressing everyone, spread his arms and happily announced that it was only about him and his sadness. But the party was still in honor of Charlotte. Sitting down next to her, Akihito suggested they go and talk to the other guys. Charlotte flatly refused. She was fine sitting at the table. Akihito pointed out that the other kids would be offended if she ignored them like that. Sitting with a glass of juice, the girl stared at the floor. When asked what was wrong, Charlotte glared at him angrily and replied irritably with the same answer. Charlotte didn't want to join them. She just wanted to sit there. Akihito said that was fine and said, "Well, have fun here." Charlotte smiled and started drinking orange juice. Sitting with the girls, he felt tense again. Arisa, in particular, was giving him scorching looks. He decided to switch gears and ask Karen if she wanted more juice. Karen choked. Apologizing, Akihito inquired about her condition. Akihito advised her to take a couple of deep breaths. Karen covered her mouth with a napkin. He noted that this helps the trachea after coughing. Karen followed his advice. Turning to the girls, Arisa called Akihito a crook. The guy cried out that she was imagining things. Charlotte watched the scene with contempt. Charlotte pulled him by the sleeve of his shirt and began to approach him. The guy was scared. He asked what she was doing and why. Without answering these questions, Charlotte asked, "Does he like big ones?" The guy yelled that it wasn't true and that it was a misunderstanding. Arisa, observing his behavior, emphasized that he was still making excuses. Now Akihito shouted at Arisa. He ordered her to stop adding fuel to the fire. Arisa laughed and noted his strong agitation. Alone with Karen, Akihito decided to change the subject. He asked her what she was interested in. Karen felt awkward. Fiddling with her fingers, she replied that she was interested in soft toys. Akihito asked what kind. Karen said, Then she paused and asked if he was really interested. Akihito didn't understand. Karen explained that it was a childish hobby. Akihito supported her. He said there was nothing to be embarrassed about. These toys are cute, and many adults like them too. Karen lit up with happiness. She asked if he liked toys too. Akihito confirmed that he did. Karen handed him her phone with a picture of the doll on it. She asked if he liked it. Akihito stared at the doll. He couldn't believe it was handmade. Karen was embarrassed and nodded slightly, confirming that it was her work. Akihito spoke admiringly about what a talented craftswoman she was. The girl laughed quietly. Behind them, Charlotte tugged at the boy's clothes. She looked at him with such longing that he noticed it himself. Akihito turned his attention to Charlotte. He asked her how she was adjusting to the class. Confused, the girl replied that everything was easy because everyone around her was so kind. Akihito was genuinely happy for her. On the other hand, Karen sat down next to the guy. She showed him another craft project, a notebook with a cat on it. Akihito was happy to see it and asked Karen if she liked cats. She said they were cute and affectionate. Akihito replied that he liked them too. Karen asked if it was true. Turning around, Akihito heard Charlotte snort indignantly. When he asked her what was wrong, Charlotte called him a grumpy old man. Akihito began to apologize. The girl demanded that he play with her too. Embarrassed, Akihito turned to Arisa. Charlotte stared at him. Crossing her arms mysteriously, Arisa suggested playing King's Game. Akihito immediately refused. She got angry. He had asked for it himself. Charlotte, on the other hand, agreed. She thought it would be fun. Thanks for watching. Write your feedback in the comments. If you like the story, please like and subscribe. See you soon.